So we reached the end of chapter 4 yesterday. I'm just briefly going to go through the first chapter was most incredible, where the whole, first of all, Bhaktivinoda Thakur opens out through the whole cosmic manifestation coming down to Jambudvipa, etc., Bharatvash, and then finally Godrum, and in Godrum, Surabhi Kunj. And this is the setting for which is Mahaprabhu's land, Mahaprabhu's kingdom. So this is the reader will have immediate understanding. Yes, we're coming into the conceptions of Mahaprabhu. This is where Mahaprabhu's atmosphere is flowing. This is where it's all manifesting. And Mahaprabhu is the same as Krishna, but even more, in fact. This is Gupta Vrindavan, but there is some Vaishishtya, some speciality here in Navadvip, which is not in Braj, and that is the accessibility of this goal. It's easier to attain the goal here in Navadvip, in Goradam, than it is. Of course, Vrindavan is most exceptional, and all the Udipans, all the remembrances are very prominently there. Giriraj Govardhan, Nandagaon, Varshana, Suryakund, all of these places, Vrindavan itself, are there very clearly for us to immediately connect with Krishna's pastimes. But then what is the nature of Mahaprabhu's pastimes is that he wants to taste the speciality of himself that Radhika perceives within him. And this is taking place here in Goradam. So in Goradam, it's loaded with specialities also. And, for example, even if you just are sleeping in Goradam, it's considered Mahaprabhu will accept that as Dandavat Pranams. He will accept that as obeisances. He is so merciful. The offenses that the conditioned soul can commit in his attempts to do bhajan are much less harshly treated here in Goradam. In Vrindavan, it's like the cutting edge of a razor blade. If you make mistakes in Vrindavan, you can suffer drastically. But here, there is so much mercy flowing. So when the devotee comes to appreciate that abundance of Audarya, this is Audarya Dham, then he becomes very enlivened, remaining in Goradam. But Goradam and Vrindavan are one. They are the same. There's no difference. When we're in Goradam, we're remembering Vrindavan. When we're in Vrindavan, we're remembering Goradam. They're actually the same. But there is some speciality at the same time. So in that first chapter, we have the remarkable example of Sannyasi Thakur coming submissively at the lotus feet of Prem Das Babaji and revealing his connection, his first connection with the hearing the holy name and seeing the devotee, seeing that devotee dancing, slipping, calling out the holy name, and the ecstasy that Sannyasi Thakur perceived in that devotee made him immediately see what he was doing as inferior. This Advaita Siddhi that he had considered was the supreme. So this is discussed in the next chapter when he asks directly Prem Das Babaji, that is Advaita Siddhi the same as Mahabhav? Then there's a whole long discussion there. But in that, throughout the first chapter, it's principally describing the three vastus, Krishna, Jiva, and Maya, and what is the relationship between the two. So this same message is given in the second chapter, the third chapter, and the fourth chapter, because we're hearing it from different perspectives. So Sannyasi Thakur asks specifically in the first chapter, if religion is one, or dharma is one, why are there so many different interpretations of it? It's such a beautiful question. You could open any sort of discourse that you're giving to general people, for example, with this particular question. If dharma is one, what is dharma? What is the nature of dharma? And this would be explained. And then to appreciate that if a tradition or a religion doesn't have a quantity of Shuddha Dharma, pure Dharma, Nitya Dharma, then it's a very weak religion or a very weak doctrine. So he also says that the purity of any religion depends on the amount of Shuddha Dharma or Nitya Dharma that it contains within it. So we can just examine the prominent religions on the planet, for example, Islam, Christianity, and just see the degree of Dharma within those religions to get an appreciation for this fact. And then in the second chapter, he asks the beautiful question about if the jiva is infinitesimal, how can his eternal Dharma be full and pure? And then this is answered that you're just looking at it from a material, mundane vision. You're not considering transcendental time. And this is also answered in the second part of the question. If the material function of the jiva is formed at the time he is constituted, how can that function be eternal? So again, the consideration of what is actually eternality is beyond material time, past, present, and future, etc. So this is all opened out and beautifully explained. These chapters we can go over again and again and again and again, because every time you go over them, you're going to get a deeper and deeper appreciation for sure. It's a continuum flow. If we try to capture it and put it in a box and say, it's like this, it's only like this, I think you will actually be restricting the flow of the current of the truth. If you try to analyze it too closely and think, yes, this is the only interpretation of this, it's like with I described before about our Gayatri mantras. I told you previously how one time I wanted to collect for many of the devotees. They would come to my Gurudev and it would be a large gathering, and my Gurudev would speak the mantras to a large group, well, individually, but then he would speak the meanings collectively. And I collected all recordings of these, not recordings, but different devotees who told me exactly what Gurudev was, how he was describing each of the mantras. And I wrote them all down so as to help the devotees get an understanding of the meaning of each mantra. And I sent it to Gurudev for his approval. And Gurudev was very unhappy. He said, no, you can never publish this because this will make someone think, yes, the mantra only means this. It doesn't mean anything else. The mantra is evolving and growing, just like on the pages of Jaiva Dharma. If you try to capture it and put it in a square box and say, yes, it's only like this, how is it going to be inspiring to go forward? Yes, it's nice to understand the platform, but then after the platform is established, then we want to use the platform to springboard to higher states of consciousness. You understand what I'm saying? We can't solidify it too much with our very clever, analytical, academic, intellectual.
It's very relative.
Yes, in the various stages of our own life,
Our life.
if you're chanting properly, then your consciousness is going to be evolving.
Correct.
Everything I've said before, it's evolving, and we are transforming with that evolution of consciousness. This is what we're doing. So if you try to fix it too much closely, so catch the current, catch the flow. And the flow is principally Sambandha Gyan is being unpacked, and Abhideya and Prayojan. And the dynamic of guru-disciple relationship. We have Prem Das Babaji instructing Sannyasi Thakur. He has that incredible vision in the third chapter, and he gives up his, is it the third or the second chapter? He gives up his third chapter. He gives up his sannyas dress and takes the name Vaishnava Das. So we see this example when Krishna bestows his mercy and you start to see outside of your own existence, you start to see a spurti of the spiritual reality, then your own insignificant life and so on can easily be purified and set aside. Understand? So Vaishnava Das is doing like that, or Sannyasi Thakur, and then he puts on the dress of a Vaishnava. And then he, in his turn, now he's instructing Lahari Mahashai. So this was in the 4th chapter. And Lahari Mahashai was begging for shelter at the lotus feet of Vaishnava. So the whole etiquette is built in alongside the presentation of the philosophy. It's both. It's running parallel. It's a completely holistic presentation. It's not just giving us yards of Siddhanta, etc., and and subject, considerations of that nature, but it's giving us how to live it, how to bring it to reality. And the final message in chapter 4 to Lahari Mahashai was chant Nam. Chanting Nam is going to reveal and reconcile all of these truths. This is the process. And the result of his chanting, after several days, he comes back and wants to know the meaning of Prayojan Tattva. This was in the final words of the 4th chapter. So see the current where we're going. We're involving absolutely everything in existence. It's packed. It's so full. There are so many truths here to appreciate, but there is a thread, a simple thread going through it all that we can catch, and we can relate everything to this thread. So now we're going to continue the thread into the 5th chapter. So now, just to reiterate briefly from the last section that we read in the 4th chapter, was how, yes, Lahari is now emotionally weeping at the feet of his guru. When emotion genuinely happens like this means the heart is full. Like a madman, he can't cry, but a transcendentally madman, his heart is filled with affection and sweetness, and tears will come to his eyes. So Lahari is weeping at the feet of Vaishnava Das. You understand? And Lahari is glorifying the principle of Guru. If we have gathered this so far of the absolute necessity, imperativeness to take Guru in a faithful, sincere way, then we have understood everything. Then we have understood really the principle. Because if that principle is lacking, we can't move. Guru Nishta is the backbone of our devotional success or progress. Absolutely essential. So we're always considering, how can I serve Guru and the Vaishnavas, or our Guru Gan, all those seniors, more Vaishnava Seva. So now we're coming to chapter 5. So Vaidhi-bhakti is Nitya, not Naimittika-dharma. So Vaidhi-bhakti has been described as respectable, just like the 4 Purusarthas are respectable, because this is what all religions followed prior to Mahaprabhu. Dharma, Artha, Karma, Moksha, right? So they're respectable, but they're not Nitya. It's not, Moksha is not going to give us the highest estimation. We want to be freed from this material pricking and pushings, but Moksha is not the answer for that. That's not going to give us that. So Lahari Mahashai had a residence in Shantipur. His 2 sons were both highly educated. His elder, Chandranath, who was 35 years old, was a zamindar and managed all the household affairs. He was also a scholar in medical science. Chandranath never underwent any hardship for the sake of spiritual progress. So that says everything. He wasn't really serious about a spiritual practice. But he commanded tremendous respect in the Brahmin community. Well, that's an amazing sentence. This is what Bhaktivinoda Thakur has been describing to us that the Brahmin community, they have this high respect in the caste system, but they're not, that they're following this Naimittika-dharma. They're not following. We've just discussed all of that in the last chapter, because Lahari Mahashaya was filled with this conception, this abhiman of being a respectable Brahmin. So he had exactly the same. So now his son naturally has the same. Bhaktivinoda Thakur was making it clear. He employed servants, maids, doorkeepers, and other workers, and he managed all the household affairs with comfort and prestige. We get the picture? It's very typical, actually, in India, in Bharatvash, very typical that the families are engaging like this, and they have plenty of this prestige, so this is the enemy of the Vaishnava, this pratishta. We don't want this. This is not our objective. From childhood, the younger son, Devidas, had studied the Shastras dealing with logic, Nyaya Shastra. Nyaya Shastra means debating, basically. You can look in the glossary of terms, and there's a whole page description on what is Nyaya Shastra. So if you're curious about what is the meaning of Nyaya Shastra, you can see in the glossary. It's a whole page description, but principally it's about debating with material objects. It's not about coming to a place of transcendence. It's like Mahaprabhu himself was like a scholar of Nyaya initially in the school, in the Pandit. He was studying scripture to have debates, etc. And he would present arguments, and then he would defeat his own arguments, and then he would re-establish his original arguments. This is all like the brilliance of debate, and the usage of language. So Nyaya is, but then when Mahaprabhu, of course, met Ishvara Puri, then his purpose to establish himself as a Pandit had no more value after that. Then he just showed us the way of the devotee. But he showed us this transition coming from the Pandit or Nyaya to the Bhakta. So all of these transitions are helpful for the devotee to appreciate. We also go through different transitions in our lives where we leave various worthless truths behind that we might have thought were very valuable at some particular time, like Bhaktivinoda Thakur. When he first came in contact with Chaitanya Charitamrita, he was able to discard so many philosophical precepts he'd had previously. So it's just, again, that evolution of consciousness. Nyaya Shastra, and that presents the codes of religious ritual, Smriti Shastra. Yes, that's what it presents. Across the road from the family residence, he had opened a Pathashala, a school dedicated to the study of the 4 Vedas and 4 subjects: Sanskrit grammar, theoretic knowledge, theoretic, logic, and philosophy. Theotoric logic, and philosophy. Theory, basically. There he taught a group of 10 to 15 students and had the title Vidya Ratna, Jewel of Learning. Vidya means learning and Ratna means jewel. One day, Bhaktivinoda Thakur is giving you should understand that this Jaiva Dharma was actually written for the Indian populace in mind. That was his target audience. And the Shikshamrita was written for the Western world. When you read Bhaktivinoda Thakur's Shikshamrita, which is written about the same time as this, that is very much orientated to the development of the Western cultures, etc. It starts off by exposing America as just being a country that's only 250 years old or 300 years old culturally. So what truths can it really propagate in the world on such a shallow history, whereas the Aryan culture is so much more significant? So topics like that are discussed in Shikshamrita, but Jaiva Dharma, so this picture that he's given here now is very, very typical of a caste Brahmin. And we're going to hear about the caste Brahmins in the 6th, 7th, 8th chapters all the way through, because it's an obstacle to our growth, because this Nitya-dharma is beyond the caste and creed of the Varnashram system. One day, a rumor circulated in Shantipur that Kalidas Lahari Mahashai had put on the dress of an ascetic and had become a Vaishnava. The news spread everywhere, at the bathing ghats, in the marketplace, and on the streets. In other words, gossip. I mean, this is a very nice way of putting it. This is just gossip. The gossip ran around. Someone said, "The old man has become senile. He was a man of ideal character for so long, but now he has gone mad." Someone else said, "What kind of disease is this? All kinds of happiness are there in his home. He is a Brahmana by birth, and his sons and family members are all obedient to him. What suffering could drive such a man to adopt the life of a mendicant?" This is what people think. We should know who is it that we're looking to preach to, for example. If we're out in the field and we're soliciting devotees, we're trying to encourage devotees, we should know the background of them. Most are sunk in this conception that to drop all these material gains that you can profit from in this life would be tragic. Like so many people, boys, for example, they come to the Gaudiya Math and then they're pulled away again by their parents on the consideration of marriage. So many are actually like that. They want to come, but the parents' tradition of marriage is very strong because they want everyone to suffer like they're suffering. They're in a pit of suffering and they want everyone else to be in the same pit of suffering. Another person said, "This is the ill fate of those who wander here and there shouting, 'This is Dharma, this is Dharma,' all criticizing the Vaishnavas." So a virtuous man said, "Kalidas Lahari Mahashai is a very pious soul. He is materially prosperous, and now in his maturity, he has developed love for Harinam." So how beautiful. So we're getting a picture. Bhaktivinoda Thakur is like painting. This is a very creatively inspiring granta, this Jaiva Dharma. As different people gossiped and spread various rumors, someone went to Devidas Vidyaratna and reported what he had heard. Vidyaratna became quite anxious and went to his elder brother. "Brother," he said, "it looks as if we have to face great difficulty because of father." You see, everything is on public opinion. How shallow. Facebook is like that for many. Unless they get the thumbs up, they feel like that they're not getting sufficient respect from the general people. Popular opinion is not going to necessarily hold the truth. I've said before, the example like 3 billion drunks are not necessarily correct in their opinion, and the whole world is intoxicated with the desire for material acquisitions. It doesn't mean that anything that they're saying has value, but you believe it because so many people are saying it. So you believe in mainstream, right? We just take it all on board. Oh, because mainstream is saying it, it must be right. But it's not. It's totally hollow. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada in so many places has revealed this very, very clearly to his devotees in his various letters and so on. The society is completely hollow. We should wake up and realize it. And then we'll realize what is true Dharma. Because until we wake up to that fact that there's so much fictitious um, propagation or propagating these um, aposidantic, not aposidantic even, just distractions, Mayic conclusions, trying to put these Mayic conclusions onto the populace from birth. You read the school books, etc. Vivekananda is like pushed greatly now in India. Anyway, we have to wake up to the world we live in. We've said before, this is Kali Yuga. This is Kali Yuga. This is the age of demons. And the demons are in control, absolutely. But they don't have to control the Vaishnavas' minds, like Prahlad Maharaj. He was not influenced by Hiranyakashipu. Hiranyakashipu swept all of the worlds into demonic activities. He had them all serving him. But Prahlad was fearless. We have to become bold and fearless. Like tomorrow is Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati's disappearance day, and we appreciate his great fearlessness in his life as a preacher, because in those were the times, what we're reading now, that Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati was doing his preaching in the face of this casteism, in the face of Brahmanism, and people were very critical. Like in the time of Narottam also, he also had to undergo so much criticism there. So we are in the same position. Don't become complacent. Don't start to think that, yes, society is saying anything correct. It's not. Vidyaratna became quite anxious and went to his elder brother. Brother, he said, it looks as if we have to face great difficulty because of father. He is staying in Godrum, in Nadia, on the plea of maintaining good health, but he has fallen into bad company there. It is impossible to ignore the outcry in the village about him. Chandranath said, Brother, I have also heard some rumors. Our family is highly respected, but now we can no longer show our faces because of our father's activities. We have always belittled the descendants of Advaita Prabhu, but now what has become of our own house? Come, let's go inside. We shall discuss this matter with mother and decide what should be done. Just like a demonic mood, and asura, they have to be the controllers. They have to try and rectify it. They cannot see any transcendental influence coming here. How can I erase this problem? How can I solve this problem? Soon afterwards, Chandranath and Devidas were seated on the second floor veranda, taking their meal, which was served by a Brahmini widow. Well, isn't that significant? A Brahmini is serving the Brahmanas. Their mother sat with them. Chandranath said, Mother, have you heard any news of father? Mother, completely innocent. Why, he's well, isn't he? He is staying in Sri Navadvip and has become mad after Harinam. Why don't you bring him here? Devidas said, Mother, father is quite well, but according to the reports we have been hearing, we can no longer rely on him. On the contrary, if we brought him here, he would become a social disgrace. Mother became somewhat perturbed and asked, What has happened to him? Just recently I went to the bank of the Ganga and had a long talk with the wife of one of the leading Goswamis. She told me, Your husband has met with great auspiciousness. He has earned tremendous respect among the Vaishnavas. So here's from another side. Devidas raised his voice slightly and said, He has certainly gained respect, but at the cost of our heads. Would he have remained at home in his old age and accepted our service? No. But see now, he's bent on defaming our prestigious family by subsisting on the remnants of ragged mendicants of different castes. This was the greatest thing. Srila Bhakti-Vigyan Bharati Maharaj, he shared these experiences with us when he came from a very closed Brahminical family, and he went through great difficulty when he moved into the mutt, being served by non-Brahmanas. And I could understand what he was saying when you're brought up from birth, from many generations like this, how to accept food from the hand of a non-Brahmin. We can't perhaps understand it in the Western culture, but for the Indian culture, it's almost like death practically. It's like you're losing your caste. So it's very significant in the culture. And how is the Vaishnava going to preach about this? This is what Bhaktivinoda Thakur is confronting. Alas, this is the tragic effect of the age of Kali. He was Such an experienced man, but what has become of his intelligence? Mother said, bring him here now and keep him hidden until we can persuade him to change his mind. Chandranath said, what other alternatives do we have? Devi, go to Godrum secretly with 2 or 3 men and bring father here. Devidas said, you both know very well that father has no regard for me because he considers me to be an atheist. I am afraid that he may not even speak to me if I go there. Devidas had a maternal cousin called Shambhunath, who was very dear to Lahari Mahashai. He had stayed with him for a long time, and he had rendered much service to him. It was decided that Devidas and Shambhunath would go together to Godrum, so a servant was sent that very day to a Brahman's house in Godrum to arrange for their residential quarters. The next day, when Devidas and Shambhunath had finished their meal, they set out for Godrum. I'm just interested to see the way they actually move around. They send their servants to book them a room somewhere. Everything is sort of like arranged. Like the Brahmins are the higher caste. So everyone is to serve the Brahmins. And they have traditionally for centuries taken advantage of that. Not taken advantage, but it's supported their position. Because as a real Brahmana, it means you don't want anything material. Traditionally, in Treta Yuga, etc., the Brahmanas, they were in the most esteemed position. Krishna is described in Dwarka would feed 1,000 Brahmanas every day. He showed such great respect for the Brahmanas because a traditional Brahmana has no material desires. He's completely aloof from this material world, and he's spending his whole time in teaching the people or in doing his puja or conducting yagyas, etc. That's what a real Brahman is doing. But in Kali Yuga, they're just living off the same name and fame that they acquired previously to fulfill all their various material needs and so on. Isn't it? This is what they're actually doing. Having reached their appointed lodging, they got down from their palanquins, and gave the bearers permission to depart. A Brahmin cook and 2 servants had arrived there in advance. So we see the picture here. They're not like being described here as super wealthy people. They're just normal Brahmins who have got their material facilities together, and this is how the Brahmins conduct themselves. At dusk, this is not an exaggeration. This is not an exaggeration that Bhaktivinoda Thakur was bringing out here. This is how the caste system operates even today. At dusk, Devidas and Shambhunath made their way towards Sri Pradumnya Kunj. On their arrival, they saw Lahari Mahashai sitting on a mat of leaves on Surabhi terrace. With his eyes closed, he was chanting Harinam on a Tulsi Mala, and his body was decorated in 12 places with tilak. Devidas and Shambhunath slowly climbed up onto the terrace and offered pranam at his feet. On hearing footsteps, Lahari Mahashai opened his eyes and was astonished to see the 2 men. Shambhu, he exclaimed, what brings you here? How are you? By your blessings, we are quite well, they replied politely. Will you take your meal here? Asked Lahari Mahashai. We have already arranged for a place to stay, they replied. You need not worry about us. So we get the instant mood of this Vedic cultural reception of meeting and immediately offering some kind words, offering polite respects to the senior, and offering some foodstuffs, etc. At that moment, loud chanting of Sri Hari's name was heard from Sri Premdas Babaji's Madhavi Malati Bawa. Vaishnava Das Babaji came out of his kutia and asked Lahari Mahashai, why is there such a loud sound of Harinam from Paramahamsa Babaji's grove? Lahari Mahashai and Vaishnava Das Babaji went ahead to investigate and found many Vaishnavas circumambulating Babaji, Mahashai and chanting Sri Hari's name. The two of them also joined in the assembly. Everyone offered Dandavat Pranam to Paramahamsa Babaji Maharaj and sat down on the terrace. Devidas and Shambhunath were also seated on one side of the terrace, like crows in the assembly of swans. In the meantime, one of the Vaishnavas said, "We have come from Kantaka Naga, Katwa. Our main purpose is to take darshan of Sri Navadvip Mayapur and to obtain the dust of the lotus feet of Paramahamsa Babaji Maharaj." So they have visitors. Paramahamsa Babaji Maharaj felt embarrassed and said, "I am a great sinner. You have simply come to purify me." After a short time, it was discovered that these Vaishnavas were all experts in singing bhajans, devotional songs glorifying Sri Hari. Mridanga and kartels were brought at once, and a senior member of the assembly began to sing a bhajan from Pratana. So we can sing this bhajan on Monday. But the actually we can go. I can read the translation before we leave of the bhajan. O Shri Krishna Chaitanya Chandra, O Prabhu Nityananda, O Gadadhar, O Advaita Chandra, Shri Gaura Bhaktas, O Gaura Bhaktas, O Vaishnava Thakur, you are a boundless ocean of mercy. Please bestow your profuse mercy on a sinful creature like me. O Master, please be merciful and deliver this person intoxicated with the pride of high birth, education, wealth, and attachment to wife, children, and family members. So this is the enemy, so to speak. This attachment to high birth, education, wealth, and so on. This is what we're seeing Vaishnava Das give up, Sannyasi Thakur give up. We've just seen what Lahari Mahashai gave up in the last chapter, this mood of reputation, he gave it up. And now Devi Das and Shambhunath, they're witnessing, they're perhaps hearing these bhajans. Please purify me of my lust for women and wealth and the desire for prestige. This is my prayer. O servant of Sri Krishna, please be merciful and give me a taste for Sri Nam, a compassion for all jivas, and let me delight in the association of Vaishnavas. The shade of your lotus feet is my only hope, my sole refuge in life and death. When this bhajan came to an end, the Vaishnavas sang a prayer composed by Kalidas Lahari Mahashai, which was charming and full of poetic sentiments. So I think we can carry on Monday. So very beautiful mood that is manifesting now. We've come from the hustle and bustle of Shantipur and the Brahmana household of Chandranath and Devi Das, etc. And we've seen the more or less confrontation with the father. And now we've been blessed with the nectar of listening to the kirtan by the Vaishnavas from Katwa have come with their kirtan and singing beautifully. How kirtan cuts through everything and brings the whole consciousness to a very beautiful place. So Jaiva Dharma ki jai, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki jai, Gauda Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol. On Saturday, I spoke the translation of this beautiful bhajan. I'm going to chant this again, and then we'll go on to page 78, which is where we're up to. So yes, the pastime so far, just to refresh, is that Devi Das and Shambhu have come to take Lahari back, and Lahari now is in a position where he was in the previous chapter, seeking instruction from Vaishnava Das. Now Devi Das is hearing these instructions from Larihya Mashai, what he's learnt from Vaishnava Das. So see the consistency that Bhaktivinoda Thakur is presenting this scripture. Very beautiful. So yes, these Vaishnavas had come, and they were from Katwa, and they were Kirtaniyas. So they sang this beautiful bhajan. O Sri Krishna Chaitanya Chandra, O Prabhu Nityananda, O Gadadhar, O Advaita Chandra, Gaura's Bhaktas. O Vaishnava Thakur, you are a boundless ocean of mercy. Please bestow your profuse mercy on a sinful creature like me. O Master, please be merciful and deliver this person intoxicated with the pride of high birth, education, wealth, and attachment to wife, children, and family members. That's the crux of it. We've just been talking all about this. This is called samsara. And it's interesting, the verse before, O Vaishnava Thakur. They are the person who is a Vaishnava will never consider himself a Vaishnava. He always considers himself to be the servant of the Vaishnavas. Any sincere personality, sadhak, is not going to be thinking, yes, I am a Vaishnava. He's going to be thinking others are far more advanced than me. And this way he can actually make his progress, because this ghastly demon of pride, once that comes in, then that's those pride comes in along with envy. And because envy is crackling in this whole material world, there's nothing but envy here. It's just in all the atmosphere totally. And pride is a part of that envy. Those two qualities. Please purify me of my lust for women and wealth and the desire for prestige. This is my prayer. Enormous prayer. These are, monumental. If we can be purified of these traits within our natures, we will be relieved of a greatest burden. O servant of Sri Krishna, please be merciful and give me a taste for Sri Nam and compassion for all jivas, and let me delight in the association of Vaishnavas. The shade of your lotus feet is my only hope, my sole refuge in life and death. The shade of the Vaishnava's lotus feet. He's praying to his guru. He's praying to the topmost Vaishnava, guru. When this bhajan came to an end, the Vaishnavas sang a prayer composed by Kalidas Lahari Mahashai, which was charming and full of poetic sentiment. Actually, this is a beautiful bhajan to sing. Miche Maya Vashai Samsara Sagare Padiya. I don't know the melody just straight off. I'll just speak the translation. I fell into the ocean of samsara and became enslaved in futile activities by the influence of Maya. You were merciful and delivered me by giving me the shade of your lotus feet. Always a mood of gratitude. We have great gratitude for the Vaishnava's kripa and mercy. If we're feeling any progress, it's only due to the Vaishnava's mercy, nothing more. O Vaishnava Thakur, please hear me. I have surrendered my head at your feet. Please dispel my misery. Yes, Sharanagati is there. Pride of caste is a terrible hell. That's exactly what we've been talking about. Pride of caste. And they don't even know it's a terrible hell. It's a terrible hell. Why? Because it's planted firmly on the material platform. The caste is only relevant for this one particular birth. It's not that the soul is a Brahmin. The soul is not a Kshatriya or a Vaishnava or Shudra. Naham Viprana Chandrapati Vaishnava Shudra, Naham Vani Na Chakravat Ishtu. Kintu Pradyan Nikhila Paramananda Puramridabda Gopi Bharatu Kamalayo Das Dasanudas. This is the identity of the soul. Pride of caste is a terrible hell. Material learning is but an aspect of ignorance. That's not often what we hear, is it? We don't hear that regularly. I teach in our Gurukul across the river, and they have to go and attend all the various curriculum, government exams, etc. But they are knowing that this material education is not going to lead them to any transcendental place at all. And actually it's very dangerous because it can just encourage you more into the material society. That's what it'll do. What is the value? Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Maharaj, he said directly, he said material education can be an impediment for your devotion to flourish. Because material education, then you'll start to have the misconception that you know something. You'll get an exam paper, it says, yes, you've passed. You've got your PhD, you've got your master's, you've got this and that and the other. Oh, yes, I am very intelligent. But actually, we're not intelligent, just like Sanatana Goswami when he came in front of Mahaprabhu. And he said, everyone is telling me that I'm intelligent, but I don't even know who I am. Mahaprabhu said, very good. Jivara Sarupoi Krishnera Nitya Das. This is what he said to him. So this material intelligence is not a plus or a bonus. Of course, we have to be intelligent to take the right path. It's not that we go to sleep on these matters. Our intelligence should be sharp and clear and crystal. Our consciousness should be aware and acute of all the aspects of this world that we live in. But when it's talking material intelligence here, it's talking about like university degrees, etc. It's talking about what the drunkards of material society consider is a healthy educational program. And certainly here in Bharatvarsh in India, there are more schools now than, you know, they're all over. They're just springing up everywhere. They've got this um, ridiculous focus that we have to get an education. And then what happens when you've got the education? It's like there's an inflation of masters in the world. There's master's degrees everywhere. You can't even get a job as a sweeper, right? You can be a master's in whatever, and you can't even get a job as a sweeper. So what is the value of it? But the biggest hindrance is that it creates pride. This is the biggest hindrance. Material education, and if you've got any acclaim given by the material world for your elevated status in the educational academic world, then that is only going to be obstructing. Of course it'll be obstructing. Unless you're using that, if you're like an architect and you've learnt the science of building, etc., or if it's some practical application of what you've studied. But if it's just something ephemeral and has no real meaning in life except to give you extra pride, what is its value? Pride of caste is a terrible hell. Material learning is but an aspect of ignorance. Ignorance because we don't know who we are, really, like Sanatana Goswami. Please purify me and deliver me to the feet of Nitai. Please extinguish my blazing agony. Heno Nitai Bine Bai Radha Krishna Paitenai. That without taking shelter of the lotus feet of Nitai, how can you come to Radha and Krishna? Nitai's kripa must be essential. By your mercy, may the holy names of Sri Yugal appear on my tongue, and may Sri Radhe Shyam appear in my heart. This is the prayer of Kalidas. So Kalidas has written this prayer. He himself is appreciating the terrible hell of his caste, this Brahminical caste, and we're seeing it clearly in reflected now in his son, Devidas. So see the continuity coming through from the first chapter to this chapter, chipping away, purifying these material purusarthas, which we've talked about at the very beginning of the Falshruti. This is what it's doing. Singing this bhajan together, all of them became maddened with joy. At the end, they repeated the line, Jaguka Sri Radhe Shyam. May Sri Radhe Shyam appear in my heart, again and again, and began to dance exuberantly. As they continued to dance, a few Bhavuk Vaishnavas fell unconscious. An extraordinary atmosphere developed, and as Devidas witnessed all this, he began to think that his father was deeply immersed in the pursuit of spiritual truth, and that it would be difficult to take him home. So we're seeing through the eyes of Devidas these extraordinary behaviors of the Vaishnavas. It was about midnight when the meeting broke up. Everyone exchanged Dandavat pranams and returned to their respective places. Devidas and Shambhunath took permission from their father and returned to their lodgings. All of the implications here that they paid pranams to each other before they left, and they maintained their devotional mood by offering dandavats to each other. And then they, again, I mentioned previously, they returned to their respective places. They didn't go home, they went to their places where they were resting. And then Devidas and Shambhunath, they took permission from their father and returned to their lodgings. Again, this respectful mood of the culture. They took permission from their father. I'm saying this, I'm looking at a Indian Brahmin in front of me who doesn't think, he thinks these things are just natural. But in the Western world, these things are unheard of. You don't take permission from your mother and father in all sorts of instances, mostly in the Western world. Most of the relationships are fractured and broken because of so much mixed marriages, etc. So much dissension is there. It's very hard to find a solid married unit, a family that remains together. It's an exception. It's not the norm. So therefore, the respect of the children is reduced towards the parents because they've seen them breaking that relationship. That relationship is broken out of impatience with each other. One of the partners wasn't supplying the other with sufficient sense gratification. Therefore, they decide to separate. So this means they haven't honored from the very beginning. So the children can sense this. They can sense there's some fault here. So why should they pay attention to the parents? The following day, when they had finished their meal, Devi and Shambhu went to the kutia of Lahari Mahashai. Devidas Vidyaratna offered pranams to Lahari Mahashai and said, Dear father, I have one request to make of you. Please come and reside in our house at Shantipur. We will all be very happy and serve you at home. We can all arrange we also we can also arrange for a solitary kutia for you, if you give your permission. Lahari Mahashai replied, It is a good idea, but I would not get the type of sadhusanga in Shantipur that I get here. Devi, you know the people of Shantipur. They are so godless and so fond of slandering others, that a man can hardly be satisfied to live there. Granted, there are many brahmanas there, but their intelligence has become crooked by their association with shallow-minded, materialists like the weavers. So he's giving us the history here. Fine garments, grandiose words, and blasphemy of Vaishnavas are the three characteristics of the people of Shantipur. The descendants of Advaita Prabhu have undergone so much trouble there that they have become almost inimical to Mahaprabhu. By such negative association, you should therefore grant that I may stay here in Godrum. That is my desire. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur is giving us some historical context here, that in the time when he was writing this, Shantipur was like this. Actually, he's writing this 300 years before, just after Mahaprabhu has left. And how quickly that vicious demon of Kali Maharaj has just enveloped the people's consciousnesses, has come in. It's like it's described, as soon as Krishna leaves this planet, what's that? Krishna Swadharma Pajate Dharmajanadi. That Purana code denoted. This Bhagavat Purana has arisen just after the departure of Krishna for his own abode, accompanied by religion, knowledge, etc. So when Krishna goes to his own abode, those principles of religiosity also go with him. We see in the pastime of Yudhisthira Maharaj, when he's waiting for Arjun to return from Dwarka, and he starts to see many anomalies. Jackals are howling, cows are crying. He can hear rattling chains of like wheels going around in the ether. and all kinds of inauspicious omens are there, and he's understanding, yes, now Kali Maharaj is going to Kali Maharaj is just waiting for Krishna to leave. Parikshit, he chastised him, but as soon as Krishna leaves with his associates, with the Yadus, then Kali Maharaj enters so strongly. So we see this. Even when the Mahabhagavats, when they leave, we were talking yesterday about Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. As soon as he left the planet, what did his wonderful disciples do? So many of them began to fight with each other over properties. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was lamenting, if I could sell this property of Bug Bazaar and take all the marble off the wall and print books, I would. He wasn't impressed with that opulence at all. And what were the devotees thinking? They actually wanted that opulence. So they fought about it. It was a tragic end. So that was like Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was holding back the influence of Kali Maharaj in the consciousnesses of those people. But as soon as he left, then Kali Maharaj walked straight in. Same with Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. He was also holding everything back. Then as soon as he left, all kinds of anomalies came into the movement of this Krishna conscious ISKCON society. While he was there, he was keeping everything under control. Fine garments, grandiose words, and blasphemy of Vaishnavas are the three characteristics of the people of Shantipur. The descendants of Advaita Prabhu have undergone so much trouble there that they have become almost inimical to Mahaprabhu by such negative association. You should therefore grant that I may stay here in Godrum. That is my desire. Godrum is right. Even today, Godrum, just for your information, is like off the track, so to speak. It's like, really and truly, we're living almost in an atmosphere of 200 or 300 years ago. There's very, very little material development on this side of the Jalangi or this side of the Ganga. It's really very, very simply arranged here on this side. And interestingly, even the electricity is like half the cost of what it is across the river. In Mayapur, I think it's like 8 or 9 rupees a unit. Here it's like 3 or 4 rupees a unit. So somehow or other, Godrum has maintained its quietness as far as the increase in materialism is concerned. Nobody wants to build it up particularly. There's almost no Westerners living on this side. Just one, down by the river. Ram Sharda. Devidas said, Dear Father, what you say is true, but why must you have anything to do with the people of Shantipur? Stay in a solitary place and spend your days cultivating your religious practices, such as Sandhya Vandana. A Brahman's daily work is also his Nitya-dharma, and it is the duty of a great soul like yourself to be absorbed in that way. Ha! Now, this is like a red flag for Lahari Mahashai. Now he can start purifying Devidas's misconception about Sandhya Vandana, which he had had in the previous chapter. Becoming somewhat grave, Lahari Mahashai said, My dear son, those days are no more. Becoming somewhat grave, this means he's going to speak to him from the heart. He's going to speak to him truthfully. Now that I've lived for a few months in the association of sadhus and have heard Sri Gurudev's instructions, my understanding has changed dramatically. I understand now that what you refer to as Nitya-dharma is really Naimittika-dharma. The only Nitya-dharma is Hari-bhakti. Sandhya-vandana and other such practices are in reality Naimittika-dharma. Devidas said, Father, I have never seen or heard of such an explanation in any shastra. Is Sandhya Vandana not Hari Bhajan? If it is Hari Bhajan, then it is Nitya Dharma. Is there any difference between Sandhya Vandana and the practices that constitute Vaidhi-bhakti, such as Shravan and Kirtan? Devidas is shocked. He's shocked that his father is saying like this. Lahari said, The Sandhya Vandana that is included in Karma Kanda is significantly different from Vaidhi-bhakti. Sandhya Vandana and other such activities are performed in the Karma Kanda system in order to obtain liberation. We could say liberation at best, because usually it's performed to get remunerated materially, not even liberation. However, activities of Hari Bhajan, such as Shravan and Kirtan, have no ulterior motive. Yes, the real Shravan and Kirtan is not asking to be more involved in this material world with more material wealth, etc. It wants the opposite. The Shastras describe the results of hearing, chanting, and other limbs of Vaidhi-bhakti, but this is just to interest people who would otherwise not be inclined to perform those activities. This is a big point that he's going to bring out often, that why have the Mahajans instructed the path of Karmakand? And it's because they have appreciated there are people who don't have the adhikar yet for Gyankand. And the path of Karmakand, working for remuneration, praying to God, oh, give me this, give me that, give me that. This is karma yoga, when you want something. But doing like that is okay, because that can bring you to a place of not wanting to ask the Lord for anything, to nishkarm. That will bring you to that stage. And then from there, it can come to Gyan Yoga. And then from Gyan Yoga, it can come to Bhakti Yoga. This is the karmic ladder that we've already gone through. We've already heard this. I said already today, from karma to Gyan, then to either Astanga Yoga or, if we're fortunate, to Bhakti. This is the path. The worship of Sri Hari has no fruit other than the service of Sri Hari. That is the beauty. When you worship the Lord without any expectation, there is such an exhilaration in the heart that surpasses any other type of attraction or bliss conceivable. That is Shuddha Bhakti. And that is what we are desiring, which has nothing to do with this material world at all. It's complete. It's on the it's relating to our transcendental soul. But it takes a lot to push out all this connection we have with this material world. Even though such a short life, say 30, 40, 50, 60 years is so short, but we've built up such huge attachments during that time. Massive, particularly in the form of reputation and considering what is my identity, who I am. We're convinced of this identity as being rock solid. The principal fruit of the practice of Vaidhi-bhakti is to bring about the awakening of prem in Hari Bhajan. So we're going to stop here, but I'll just read the next question. Devidas is saying, then you do admit that the divisions or angas of Hari Bhajan have some secondary results. So now we're going to discuss those secondary results and even why those results are there. So I find this really fascinating because it's so clear, but it's chipping away at the material identity in a very significant way. Who am I? Ki ami? Who am I? Srila Gurudev ki jai, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki jai, Jaiva Dharma ki jai, Gold Premanandi. Okay, so now we're coming to page 80 of our chapter 5, and Devidas has been quite shocked when he's understood that Sandhya Vandanam is not Nitya. He was considering that this was Nitya-dharma. And this is how he's been trained, probably for many births. And all the Brahman caste are all trained in this way. One friend commented that it's like an analogy. Say, the Brahmins are in a class of their own. completely. And it's like if you go in South America, South USA, in Alabama, those places, and you're white and most people are black, like that caste distinction is there very prominently. So this caste distinction here in India is very, very prominent with the Brahmin class. And this was the um, place that Bhaktivinoda Thakur was trying to purify, because this is not in a consideration of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission at all. He's speaking to the Harijans, he's speaking to the most fallen people. He's giving them Harinam. So this is the principle. So I'm going to read the paragraph previously, and then we'll catch up with Devidas's question where we're up to. So Lahari said, the Sandhya Vandanan that is included in Karma Kand is significantly different from Vaidhi-bhakti. So in Karma Kand, it means that they're wanting something. They're performing their rituals because they have an agenda in the material world. Quite simple. Sandhyavandana and other such activities are performed in the Karmakand system in order to obtain liberation. It's either objects or liberation, bhukti, mukti, spriha javat. It's either one of these, or liberation. However, activities of Hari Bhajan, such as Shravanam and Kirtanam, have no ulterior motive. When they're purely performed, they should have no ulterior motive. The Shastras describe the results of hearing, chanting, and other limbs of Vaidhi-bhakti, but this is just to interest people who would otherwise not be inclined to perform those activities. So in other words, it's like clearing the track to begin with. It's like the kindergarten school or the initial school before we actually come into line. The worship of Sri Hari has no fault, no fruit, other than the service of Sri Hari. The principal fruit of the practice of Vaidhi-bhakti is to bring about the awakening of prem in Hari Bhajan. This is the only principle, to wake up our transcendental relationship with the Supreme Lord, with the transcendental object. Devidas, then you do admit that the divisions or angas of Hari Bhajan have some secondary results. Yes, there are secondary results. Lahari, yes, but the results depend on the different types of practitioner. Sadhak. The Vaishnavas perform sadhan bhakti for the sole purpose of coming to the perfectional stage of devotion known as Shuddha bhakti.
Siddha Bhakti.
What is it?
Siddha.
Siddha, sorry. Known as Siddha bhakti. Siddha, perfect. Shuddha, perfect. Actually, yes, they are both the same. Siddha and Shuddha bhakti. What is the difference between the two?
Siddha is like perfected stage.
Yes.
Shuddha is pure.
Pure. Yes. But in essence, they're actually...
A Shuddha Bhakta becomes a Siddha Bhakta. You practice Shuddha Bhakti and you become Siddha.
No,
Even
yes, but don't be confused with a siddha in the mystical sense, like in the yogic sense. We're talking about attaining
we
siddhis.
call sadhak Shuddha Sadhak, and that Sadhak becomes Siddha Sadhak, Siddha Bhakta, like that, isn't it?
It's not a common terminology to say siddha bhakta. You can say, of course, siddha means perfect, but it's not a common terminology. We say shuddha, which is pure, which is the clearest for us to understand, shuddha. But siddha bhakti has the principal essence of the same. Here it's saying perfectional stage of devotion known as siddhi bhakti. So the perfectional stage of devotion that the Vaishnavas perform is not having any ulterior motive. When non-Vaishnavas perform the very same divisions or angas of bhakti, they have two principal motives: the desire for material enjoyment, bhoga, and the desire for liberation, bhukti and mukti. These two desires are there prominent in the heart of those who are not Shuddha Vaishnavas. Or then we can say Siddha Vaishnavas, but normally we don't say Siddha Vaishnavas. That's not a common. We say Shuddha, pure. I think the word pure, Shuddha, is more easily understood. Externally, there is no apparent difference between the sadhana practice of the Vaishnavas and those of non-Vaishnavas, but there is a fundamental difference in nishta. Yes, it's like the distinction, for example, in Nishkarm Karma Yoga. It's very subtle. Both practitioners are doing the same thing. Both are giving some donation to the temple, for example. A regular karmi is giving $100 to the temple, but a nishkarm karmi, he's also giving $100 to the temple. But the difference is that the nishkarma is thinking, this is not my $100. I'm just giving it back to Krishna. Whereas the karmi is thinking, this is coming from my pocket. He's making a claim on that resource of Krishna's. So there's a distinction here. So these distinctions that the non-Vaishnavas, principally Devidas, who we're talking about, he's performing his various Sandhavandana because he wants to live a good, happy life here in the material world. He's putting all his focus on the material success rather than the spiritual success. When one worships Krishna through the path of karma, the mind is purified and one may obtain material fruits, freedom from disease or liberation. Yes, the mind becomes purified. If he's doing it with focused attention on, he's realizing that he's offering his fruits to Krishna. That's an upgrade from not offering your fruits to Krishna. So it's starting on the path, on the journey. It's the beginning, just the very beginning is that karmic intention. I'm offering my fruits to Krishna. Nishkarm karma is very respectable, but it's not Shuddha Bhakti.
If you come to page 902 and 906, there is the Siddha Bhakta and there is Shuddha Bhakta.
And what's the distinction described?
A pure Bhakta.
Just tell me in your own words what's the distinction described.
They say a pure Bhakta, one who performs Shuddha Bhakti is Shuddha Bhakta. Whereas Siddha Bhakta is one who is always fully immersed in activities related to Shri Krishna, who is completely unacquainted with impediments or material distress, and who incessantly tastes the bliss of prem, is called a Siddha Bhakta.
So what's the difference? In
It
essence,
is a practitioner stage, whereas Siddha is
Sudha is a practitioner stage, a Shuddha Bhakta.
Shuddha Bhakta, yes.
Read it. Read the translation then. Where is it? We look at it. 902.
Shuddha Bhakti.
Wait, Shuddha Bhakti or Shuddha Bhakta?
That you come to 906.
906. Shuddha Bhakta, a pure Bhakta, one who performs Shuddha Bhakti. And then Shuddha Bhakti, pure devotion, devotion which is unmixed with fruitive action or monistic knowledge, and which is devoid of all desires other than the exclusive pleasure of Krishna. This is known as Uttam Bhakti. Yes, Shuddha Bhakti. Now, Siddha, what page is that?
902.
Huh?
902.
902. So that's a Uttam Bhakti.
Yes.
Bhakta. 902.
You see the third one, Mother.
Siddha Karmi.
There are three definitions: realized or perfected, liberated.
Oh, Siddha just means perfected.
Liberated
realized,
soul who reside in the spiritual world.
Liberated, yes, a Siddha, or a liberated soul who accompanies Bhagavan to the material world to assist his pastimes.
Or one who has attained the perfection stage of bhakti, prem, in this life, whose symptoms are described in Bhakti Rasamrita.
Who incessantly tastes the bliss of prem is called a Siddha Bhakta. So that's practically exactly the same as a Shuddha Bhakta. I can't see the distinction, especially. I don't think there's a great distinction there. If I'm offered the choice to be a Shuddha Bhakta or a Siddha Bhakta, I'll take either. Thank you very much. You know what I mean? It seems that a Shuddha Bhakta is an Uttam Bhakta, and a Siddha Bhakta is a perfected Bhakta. So what is the difference, really and truly, in essence? There's subtle differences there, but I don't think we have to stretch our brains about it. Okay. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur is using this particular word here, Siddha Bhakta, perhaps because Devi Das will be more familiar with that because he doesn't know about Shuddha yet. He just knows about Siddha, perfections. So we have perfection in the liberated state. So that perfection will lead to ultimately Shuddha, to pure. It seems to me to be that way around. Because the Shuddha is the Uttam Bhakta. You can't become higher than the Uttam Bhagavat. What is higher than that?
Shuddha, now for example, there are different types of bhakti, right? Karma Mishra, Jnana Mishra, Sangha. Then there is Shuddha Bhakti. So Shuddha Bhakti is a practitioner stage also.
Yes, yes. It's beyond those stages. Yes.
So it is like a sadhak can practice Sangha Siddha Bhakti or
the Swarup Siddha Bhakti.
Swarup Siddha Bhakti is called Shuddha Bhakti.
Swarup Siddha Bhakti is Swarup Siddha. Yes.
Shuddha Bhakti.
Shuddha Bhakti is Swarup Siddha Bhakti. That's the highest. This is what Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is saying. The Sangha Siddha Bhakti, Arup Siddha Bhakti, and Swarup Siddha Bhakti. So Swarup Siddha Bhakti is Shuddha Bhakti. Different terminologies, but very similar in essence. When one worships Krishna through the path of karma, the mind is purified, and one may obtain material fruits, freedom from disease or liberation. So we see many people in the devotional world that are practicing bhakti from the very beginning, and their reactions to their karma has been minimized, and they are obtaining the fruits of their various desires just by practicing devotional service in a neophyte stage. Still they're attaining fruits. They're not harassed as they would have been previously. So many things become settled, but this is simply just the beginning of their journey. This is the neophyte stage, and this is the karmi stage, and it's described in the first 6 chapters or 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. This nishkaram karma yoga. This is where it comes to first. After the karmi, comes the nishkaram karma yoga. That's what I've just described before. So these are all gradations that are very helpful for the sadhak to appreciate which stage he's on. But the same worship of Krishna through the path of bhakti produces only prem for Krishna Nam. So now he's talking about Shuddha Bhakti or Siddha Bhakti. You can interchange those two. When karmis, those who follow the path of karma, observe Ekadashi, it eradicates their sins, whereas when bhaktas observe Ekadashi, it enhances their Hari Bhakti. So what a difference. For the karmis, their sins are minimized. In other words, so that they can get more pleasure from this material world. That's their intention. Or they can achieve more likely moksha, mukti, or this even bhukti. They can achieve that through following Ekadashi with some ulterior motive. But the bhakta, he just wants to enhance his devotion to Krishna. Just see what a world of difference there is. Really, really, we have to appreciate the huge. This is what he's explaining to Devi Das. Devi Das, he doesn't realize what is bhakti. He doesn't realize what is siddha bhakti or sudha bhakti. He doesn't realize either of this. He doesn't realize the connection with transcendence isn't about asking for your wish list to be fulfilled by Krishna, whereas the other process of karma is asking for Krishna to give you so many material facilities or even subtle facilities like swaga, etc. That's what the karma yogis want. The subtle difference, just like Dhruva Maharaj is the epitome of the Sakam Karma Yoga. Sakam means wanting yoga, wanting the result. So he had the desire for a kingdom greater than his great-grandfather, greater than Lord Brahma. So he attained the North Star, the pole star. So that that was his desire. The subtle difference between sadhana performed as an aspect of karma and sadhana performed as an aspect of bhakti may be known only by the mercy of Bhagavan. So it's very subtle. So Bhagavan's mercy must be there. That means, how do we get Bhagavan's mercy? Sadhu Sangha. Without the mercy of the sadhu, Bhagavan's mercy can't manifest. It has to come through that channel. That channel must be there. That means Guru. Without Guru, then how can Bhagavan give his mercy? If the practitioner hasn't submissively connected with Guru in Vishrambena Guru Seva, then how can the current flow from Bhagavan into the heart of the sadhak? It doesn't go directly. It's just like going to you can't go directly to the prime minister, so to speak. You have to go through the secretary first to get to the prime minister. It's very basic, very simple, but it's something that we have to constantly meditate on it. We may have been initiated by a guru, but what is our nishta in guru? What is our guru nishta? We may have been initiated not even understanding who this person really was, but we just understood, yes, he's a powerful person, but I haven't really developed my personal relationship with him. So how am I going to develop my personal relationship with that person? So that should always be considered by the practitioner. The bhaktas obtain the primary result, whereas the karmis are caught up in the secondary results. This is the answer to Devidas's question. What about the secondary result? So they're caught up in the second. So there are scriptures for the secondary results to be achieved. This is the Karma Kand section of the Vedas, which may be broadly divided into two categories, namely bhukti, material sense enjoyment, and mukti, liberation. So it's very clear. These are the secondary results. Yet we described before, most people in the world are going for moksha. If you go to any spiritual society, for example, that's not a Vaishnava society, they will be looking towards Shantaras in the Brahmand, moksha. That will be what they're propagating, how everyone here can become peaceful in their material consciousness rather than serve the object of transcendence, Krishna. It's a tremendous difference between night and day. So this is what he's describing to Devidas, the huge distinction basically between worshipping the Lord and worshipping yourself, because both bhukti and mukti, mukti are service to the jiva himself. It's not service to the Lord. It's self-service, this selfishness. This is ultimately our terrible disease of selfishness, which may be broadly divided in two categories, namely bhukti, material sense enjoyment, and mukti, liberation. Devidas, then why do the Shastras extol the virtues of the secondary results? Yes, he's asking this good question. Lahari, there are two kinds of people in this world, those who are spiritually awake and those who are spiritually unconscious. This is the same topic that we discussed in the second chapter and the third chapter. There are distinctions, there are varieties of people. Therefore, there are varieties of paths to reach the ultimate destination, just like the Varnashram system is actually designed so that the Sudras themselves can make advancement, the Vaishyas can make advancement, the Kshatriyas can make advancement, even the Brahmanas can. All the different castes in the Varnashram system, they can all make advancement slowly according to their adhikar, according to their eligibility and stage. This is what the secondary results are there for. The Shastras have praised secondary results for the benefit of those who are spiritually unconscious and who do not perform any pious activity unless they can visualize a forthcoming result. Unless they can see, I'm going to get something for this, I won't bother to do it. However, the Shastras do not intend such people to remain satisfied with secondary results. Rather, their attraction to secondary results should induce them to perform virtuous acts which will hasten their contact with sadhus. So it's only the contact with the sadhus, which Devidas hasn't had. Now he's coming in contact with his first sadhu, basically his father, who's giving him this vidya, this knowledge. Then by the mercy of the sadhus, they will come to know of the primary results of Hari Bhajan, and taste for those results will awaken within them. So very simple, very simple. But people miss it. They get involved in these ritualistic activities for generation after generation after generation. You know better than me. All these Brahminical yagyas and so on, like I just described, that yagya of the yagna patnis, that they were performing to reach Swagaloka, specifically said like that in the 10th canto. So if we have this intention, then without the sadhu to guide us to pure bhakti, even when the sadhu is there, still the desire for fruitive results will remain. So that has to be purified also. Devidas, then are we to understand that Raghunandana and other authors of Smriti Shastras were spiritually unconscious? He's misunderstanding. They were completely spiritually conscious, but they were giving for the spiritually unconscious. It's like if we go out and distribute books. We've already read the book, we've understood and digested it. We don't have to be on the street distributing books, but we want to give that same initial knowledge to the conditioned soul. So we're starting at the beginning there. Lahari, no, but the system is that they have prescribed is for the spiritually unconscious. However, they themselves seek the primary result. So just like Vyasadeva, he wrote so much on the Karma Kanda section, on the Gyan Kanda section, prior to writing the Srimad Bhagavatam. So many descriptions were there, like descriptions of Ekadashi, for example. If you follow Ekadashi, this will happen, this will happen. There's so many fruitive results mixed in with it to encourage the people just to follow Ekadashi. And then when you're following Ekadashi nicely, after maybe even some lifetimes, then you will come to understand actually what is the real purpose of Ekadashi. So it's very basic. Devidas, some Shastras only describe the secondary results and do not mention the primary results at all. Why is this? Lahari, there are three types of Shastra corresponding to the varieties of adhikar, eligibility, among human beings. Sattvic, of the nature of goodness, Rajasic, of the nature of passion, and Tamasic, of the nature of ignorance. The Sattvic Shastras are for people who are imbued with the nature of goodness, Sattvagun. The Rajasic Shastras are for those enveloped by the nature of passion, Rajagun. And the Tamasic Shastras are for those engrossed in the nature of ignorance, Tamagun. So there's different Shastras for different levels, but each of those Shastras is ultimately purifying the jiva to come to the next level. If you're following the Tamasic Shastras, hopefully, if you follow them carefully, you'll be inspired towards the Rajasic Shastras, etc. And even Brahmanas, there's Brahmanas who are following Tamasic Shastras. There's Brahmanas who are following Rajasic Shastras. There's Brahmanas. It'll be said just now. We'll see. We'll read. Devidas. If that is the case, how should one know which directives of the Shastras to have faith in, and how may those lower adhikar eligibility attain a higher destination? Lahari, human beings have different natures and faiths according to their different levels of adhikar. People who are impelled primarily by the mode of ignorance have natural faith in the Tamasic Shastras. Those affected primarily by the mode of passion have natural faith in the Rajasic Shastras, and those in the mode of goodness naturally have faith in the Sattvika Shastras. One's belief in a particular conclusion of the Shastra is naturally in accordance with one's faith, but this also includes Brahmanas, like I've just described, that yagya. They were yagya Brahmanas, and they were performing a yagya to achieve Swagaloka. What is that? That's not in the Shuddha line, that's in the Rajasic line. They had a desire, they had a motive. for liberation from this world and to attain Swagaloka, the fruits of Swagaloka. That was their intention. So they were following the guidance of Rajasic Shastras, and they are in the caste of Brahmins. As one faithfully, just like Devidas here, just like Lahari, they are in the caste of Brahmanas, but they're ignorant completely of these higher teachings. So therefore, what are they following? And if they chose to write about their um, uh, activities, their rituals, they would only write about the rituals that will flourish in the mode of tamagun or rajagun. They're not going to write about Shuddha because they don't have that knowledge yet, that wisdom. As one faithfully carries out the duties for which one has the adhikar, he may come into contact with sadhus and develop a higher adhikar through their association. As soon as a higher adhikar is awakened, one's nature is elevated, and one's faith in a more elevated shastra will follow accordingly. Yes, it's a gradation. Very simple. The authors of the Shastras are infallible in their wisdom and compose the Shastras in such a way that one will gradually develop higher adhikar by carrying out the duties for which one is eligible and in which one naturally has faith. It is for this reason that different directives have been given in different Shastras. Faith in the Shastras is the root of all auspiciousness. So the faith must be compounded, must be made strong within that person of lower intelligence. So his faith is made strong by the Tamasic Shastras because he understands that. It's saying you do this yagya, you drink this wine, you offer this flesh, etc. Then you can take the remnants of that yourself. So he has a desire for the wine and the meat. So he performs the yagya. So these are described in the Tamasic Shastras, right? He's getting his wine and he's getting his meat, but he's performing the yagya to achieve that. So that is better than just drinking wine and eating meat without a yagya. So he's building respect for the Shastras. This respect for the Shastras is paramount. Without respect and connection with the Shastras, we are lost completely. We are lower than Antyaja. Antyaja are outside of the caste. If we don't have any desire to connect with the wisdom of these sages and rishis from the past, what possible hope can we have of attaining anything auspicious for ourselves in this life? Shrimad Bhagavad Gita and Mimamsa Shastra are all the Shastras. This Siddhanta is clearly stated there. Yes, so it's described in the Gita all the way through. Krishna gives, if you can't do this, then do this. In chapter 12, if you can't serve me directly, then you can serve me indirectly, and so on, and so on, and so on. There are many stages of serving the Lord. Devidas, I have studied many Shastras since my childhood, but today, by your grace, I have understood their purpose in an entirely new light. Again, he's saying the same thing as previously. The karmic ladder, from karma yoga to jnana yoga to bhakti yoga. He's describing the same principle because this is the root of the deficiency in the Brahmin caste. He's talking specifically to the Brahmin caste here. He's not talking just to general people on the street. He's talking to the Brahmin caste who are misguided and have misunderstood and have based all of their auspiciousness on just being born in a family of Brahmanas rather than behaving and acting like a Brahmana. I have studied many Shastras since my childhood, but today, by your grace, I have understood their purpose in an entirely new light. Lahari, it is written in Srimad Bhagavatam 11:8-10. Can you chant this verse? Anubhayash
अनुभयाश्च महाभ्याश्च शास्त्रेभ्यः कुशलो नरः सर्वथा सारम् आदायात् पुष्पेभ्यः इव सत्पथः.
An intelligent person will take the essence of all the Shastras, whether they are great or small, just as a bumblebee gathers honey from many different types of flowers. My dear son, I used to call you an atheist. because he wasn't worshipping God directly. He was just performing the ritualistic process. Nyaya Shastra is just debating. This is what he's famous for doing. This is what Nyaya Shastra is about. This is what Devi does. He opened a school for teaching Nyaya. Now, I don't criticize anyone because faith depends on adhikar. So how can he think to criticize someone because they just don't have the eligibility to understand what is of a higher value? There is no question of criticism in this regard. Everyone is working according to their own adhikar, and they will advance gradually when the time is appropriate, although Sadguru can really push that adhikar along. He can really purify our ineligibility to make us eligible very, very swiftly. This is the potency of Sadguru. This is why the urgency is there to connect with Sadguru. He can push us along tremendously on that path if we have the fortune and the intelligence to follow his directives and indications. Everyone is working according to their own adhikar, and they will advance gradually when the time is appropriate. You are a scholar of the Shastras, dealing with logic and fruitive action. This is what the Nyaya Shastra is about. Logic and fruitive action. And he's a Brahmana. This is the point. He's a Brahmana. And he's reading the Nyaya Shastra about logic and fruitive activities. And since your statements are in accordance with your adhikar, there is no fault in them. Devidas, until now, I believed that there were no scholars in the Vaishnava Sampradaya. I thought that the Vaishnavas were mere fanatics who concerned themselves solely with one part of the Shastra. But what you have explained today has completely dispelled my misconceptions. Now I have faith that some of the Vaishnavas have truly understood the essence of Shastra. Are you studying the Shastras from any great soul these days? So something is transforming in Devidas's heart. He's hearing the supreme reality and he's softening, and he's having a mood towards a supreme higher conscious being. Some little spark has actually happened here. You can see this transition in his questions. He says, now I have some faith that some of the Vaishnavas have truly understood the essence of Shastras. So he's considering, he's respecting the Vaishnavas. First of all, his own illusioned conception of him being a Vaishnava had to be dismantled. And then he had to realize he was just performing karma. And it wasn't focused on the object of service. It wasn't focused on transcendence towards Krishna. It was focused on remuneration for himself. This is what, and he's understood that. But now he's going even further. Now he's understanding with faith something that the gift that the sadhus can actually give, which is a conception of the Supreme. My son, you may now call me a fanatical Vaishnava, or whatever you like. My Gurudev performs bhajan in the kutia next to mine. He has instructed me in the essential conclusion of all the Shastras, and I have just expressed the same thing to you. If you would like to receive instruction at his lotus feet, you may inquire from him in a devotional mood. Come, I will introduce you to him. So we see the steps, clear, beautiful, simple to follow procedures that Bhaktivinoda Thakur is laying out. The distinction between karma yoga, jnana yoga, and bhakti. The distinction between bhukti and moksha. These clear distinctions and what is our personal intention. So we have to translate all of these into our own journey, so to speak, and consider, where am I going? Do I have material desires that are bouncing around in my consciousness that I'm hoping to be fulfilled by practicing these angas of bhakti, shravanam, kirtanam, etc.? Or am I actually wanting that complete submissive surrender to the Supreme Lord Hari? So we have to introspect these according to our own particular situation. Lahari Mahashai took Devi Das Vidyaratna to the kutia of Vaishnava Das Babaji Maharaj and introduced him to his Gurudev. He then left Devi Das with Babaji Maharaj and returned to his kutia to chant Harinam. So that's a very good place to stop today. So just understand all the incredible stages that Bhaktivinoda Thakur is walking us through very clearly. And it's about purity. For the Western audience, it's not about purifying their sense of being a Brahmana or anything like that. It's just about purifying the focus of the goal. That the goal isn't material. It's the same as the verse Anyabilasata Shunyam Jnana Karmadi Anavritam. My Gurudev just said this repeatedly in every single festival we ever went to. Try to understand what is Shuddha Bhakti, what is pure Bhakti. It's not Aropsiddha Bhakti. Aropsiddha Bhakti means that I have a proclivity for something and I just happen to be offering it to Krishna. If I'm a really wonderful singer, then I just happen to be singing Krishna bhajans, but actually my real motivation is to have a chance to sing myself or to cook. I love to cook and I just happen to cook for Krishna. But if the object is Krishna in devotion, and this devotion will deepen and deepen day by day with our chanting and our practices, but it's this devotion that we are hungry and desperate to actually catch up and discover within ourselves what is that dormant, that prakatam riti satyate, that it's lying, that transcendental nature is there already in my heart. How can I connect with that essence of my being in its relationship with the Supreme Being? Because it can only be realized in relationship to the Supreme Being. If it's not going to be realized in the relationship to the Supreme Being, then it's mukti. Then it's moksha. Because in moksha, that state, there's only one. There's only the jiva. There's not the transcendental entity too. There's only one. But for love to ensue, there has to be two. So how am I cultivating my love for Krishna? It's not through gyan. That process will support, but it won't take us to the end result of devotion. We have to be, my Gurudev used to say regularly, we should think 4 or 5 times a day, how much am I truly devoted to the Lord in this particular activity? How much am I selflessly performing this activity for, not for altruistic reasons, not just, to make the conditioned souls happy or something like that, but how much am I, in a sense, wanting to bring those conditioned souls to a place of worship to the Lord and myself in the process, because that process is all inclusive. By purifying the conditioned souls, I'm hopefully purifying myself. Unless, of course, we go on a tangent and still stubbornly hold on to our own sense of greatness. When we consider in the world there are 8 billion people on the planet, and how much importance does this, our particular soul, have in relationship with others? So we should be trying to purify that sense of pride. If that sense of pride is there, nothing can transpire. So Jaiva Dharma ki jai, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki jai, Anantakota Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai, Gaur Premanandi. We've come to our topics, and Devi Das, he's been questioning his father, and Lahari has taken the role of teacher now. First of all, we had Prem Das Babaji teaching Vaishnava, teaching Sannyasi Thakur, and he became Vaishnava Das, and then Vaishnava Das is teaching Lahari, and now Lahari is teaching his son Devi Das. So all of these conceptions are fundamentally the same that Bhaktivinoda Thakur is opening out, but they're all presented with slightly different nuances, with slightly different appreciations, because our minds are so fickle and huge with all different conceptions and ideas that these brilliant um, siddhantas have to come out in different colors so that we can taste them and relish them more and more and have more realization of them. So now Devidas is about to be referred to Vaishnavadas. His father has spoken with him, and Devidas is mainly coming out of this conception of what is a Brahmana. That a Brahmana by birth has the qualification to basically lord it over society, simultaneously to being expected to be the teacher of sattvic precepts, but we see that's not the case. So Devidas is actually completely illusioned, and Lahari has already cut through an amazing amount of that misconception and illusion, but it hasn't necessarily become realized in Devidas, as we're going to discover in the next chapter, because in this chapter he's going to meet the Muslims and he's going to become very confused about the Vaishnava's reception of the Muslims. So he's still very much indeed on the bodily platform. Bhaktivinoda Thakur is genius. It's so brilliant the way this whole granta is presented. It's so deep, and the personalities and the conceptions that he's bringing out are just remarkable. And as I've often said, every single time we read it, a newer and newer appreciation of the truths that Bhaktivinoda Thakur is just highlighting throughout. So, Lahari Mahashai, this is on page 83 at the bottom, practically the last paragraph. Lahari Mahashai took Devidas Vidniratna to the kutia of Sri Vaishnava Das Babaji Maharaj and introduced him to his Gurudev. He then left Devidas with Babaji Maharaj and returned to his kutia to chant Harinam. Vaishnava Das, my dear son, what is the extent of your education? So very wonderful just to perceive the conversation. He doesn't want to know how his mother and father are, where he comes from, this and that, the other. He just wants to get straight to the quick, so to speak. And like, what is your bhajan, more or less? How is your bhajan? Where are we going with that? Something fundamentally meaningful. Devidas, I have studied up to Muktipad and Siddhanta Kusumanjali in the Nyaya Shastra and all the books of the Shmriti Shastra. Vaishnava Das, then you have labored diligently in your study of the Shastra. Please give me a sample of what you have learned. Devidas, Atyanta dukkha nivritir eva mukti. The cessation of all material miseries is known as mukti. But we know fundamentally, siddhantically, it's not. It's just the very beginning. It's what comes just before the real truth, so to speak, of realization of my relationship. In the stage of mukti, there's no description of relationship. This is called impersonal. Called mukti bhukti spriha yavat pischachi shridi vartate. These witches of Maya has got right into this Nyaya philosophy. One should always endeavor to obtain mukti, which is defined in this statement from Sankhya Darshana 1.1 and 6.5. I am seeking that liberation through faithful adherence to my prescribed duties known as swadharma. So we can have a chuckle, so to speak, because we already know that Devi Das's conception of swadharma is completely, really inappropriate to the final essence. But still, we appreciate his adhikar, and Bhaktivinoda Thakur is presenting this for us to appreciate the different adhikars that are there. Vaishnava Das, yes, I too, like yourself, once aspired for mukti after having studied all those books. Devidas, have you now given up the spiritual pursuit of mukti? Devidas is shocked. How can there be more than mukti, he's thinking. My dear son, tell me, what is the meaning of mukti? Devidas, according to Nyaya Shastra, the Jiva and Brahm are eternally distinct from each other. So it is not clear from the point of view of Nyaya how the cessation of all miseries can take place. According to the Vedanta, however, mukti refers to the attainment of non-differentiated Brahm, and in other words, the jiva's attainment of the state of oneness with Brahm. This is clear from one point of view. So in other words, merging into the Brahmajyoti, becoming one in the Brahmajyoti, is one aspect that he's understood. Vaishnavadas, my dear son, I studied Sankara's Vedanta commentary for 15 years, and I also remained a sannyasi for several years. I endeavored strenuously to attain mukti. I spent a long time deeply meditating upon what Sankara considered to be the four principal statements of the Shruti, Mahavakyas. Finally, I understood that the religious system that Sankhya advocated was newly fashioned, so I gave it up. So historically, it is newly fashioned. It comes after the advent of Krishna. It comes about 800 years before Ramanuja. So it comes about 4,000 years after the advent of Krishna. And it comes for a particular reason and purpose, to stop the Brahmins using, first of all, Lord Buddha manifests. We've been through this many times. And then he expels the Shastras because he wants to make his own philosophy prevalent, to stop the slaughter of the animals that the Brahmins have become engaged in, and preach the philosophy of ahimsa. Basically, I'm saying it very, very minimal. And then all the Shastras were taken out of India because Buddha gave his nirvanic Brahma Nirvishesh philosophy without Shastra. And then Lord Shivji, Maheshdev, he manifests as Sankaracharya, and he brings the teachings of the Vedic teachings back into India prominently. But he's still speaking the same impersonal Mayavad conception that Lord Buddha was. It was the only way he could bring the scriptures back. He couldn't make such a dramatic change in consciousness between what so many people had been influenced by Lord Buddha and a more personal conception. It took until Ramanuja to begin that personal conception, and then Madhvacharya, etc. Finally, I understood that the religious system of Sankara advocated was newly fashioned, so I gave it up. Devidas, why did you consider it to be recent and antagonistic? Why did you consider it to be a recent and antagonistic view? Vaishnavadas, an experienced man cannot easily convey to others what he has realized through practical examination. How will those who have not experienced it to be able to understand it? Devidas could see that Vaishnavadas was a learned scholar, and that he was straightforward and deeply realized. Devidas had not studied Vedanta, and he began to think that he could do so if Vaishnavadas were merciful to him. So he inquired, "Am I fit to study Vedanta?" So with this one particular comment, it seems to have shaken Devidas, where now, just in a few moments, he's putting faith in Vaishnavadas, and he's in his heart actually wanting to take instruction on the real precepts of Vedanta. And he's just heard him just say practically nothing, but through the potency of Vaishnavadas, he's conveyed to him, just in a single sentence, that Sankara advocated was newly fashioned, so I gave it up. So because of his practice and personality, Vaishnavadas was able to give Devidas such a powerful impression as a sadhu. And it's these impressions from the sadhu that will change the heart. Do you know what I'm understanding what I'm saying? He's just sitting there, Vaishnavadas, but because of his erudition and who he is, he's able to influence just in a matter of moments the heart and mind of Devidas. Vaishnavadas. With the level of competence you have achieved in the Sanskrit language, you can easily learn Vedanta if you get a qualified instructor. Devidas. If you will kindly teach me, I will study under you. Vaishnavadas. The fact is that I am a servant of the Vaishnavas. There is nothing for me besides this. Paramahamsa Babaji Maharaj has mercifully instructed me to chant Harinam constantly, and I am doing just that. I have so little time. Besides, Jagat Guru Sri Rupa Goswami has specifically forbidden the Vaishnavas to read and hear Sankara's Sarika Bhasya, the commentary on Vedanta, so I no longer read it myself or teach it to others. However, Sri Sachinandan, who is the original preceptor of the entire world, explained the true commentary on Vedanta Sutra to Sri Sarvabhauma. Many Vaishnavas still have handwritten copies of that commentary. If you want to study it, you can make a copy, and I can help you understand it. If you want to study it, you can make a copy, and I will help you understand it. So that's interesting. He's advising him to make a copy of this, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's um, uh, writings on Mahaprabhu's commentary on Vedanta Sutra, and he's ready to assist him in understanding it. In other words, he's ready to take him forward in Krishna consciousness. You may ask for a copy from the house of Srimad Kavi Kanpur in the village of Kanchana, Pali. That's the same Kavi Kanpur that we all have. This is the time period when this has been written. Devidas, I will try. You are a great scholar of Vedanta. Please tell me frankly, will I be able to ascertain the true meaning of Vedanta by studying the Vaishnava commentary? Vaishnavadas. I have studied and taught the commentary of Sankar, and I have studied Sri Ramanuja's Sri Bhasya, and other commentaries as well. However, I have not seen any explanation of the Shastras that are superior to Mahaprabhu's. This commentary was recorded by Gopinathacharya, and it is studied by the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. There can be no doctrinal dispute in Bhagavan's own explanation of the Shastras, for his commentary accurately represents the full import of the Upanishads. If one presents this explanation of the Shastras in proper sequence, it is certain that his explanation will be respected in any assembly of learned scholars. Devidas Vidyaratna became very pleased to hear this. He faithfully offered Dandavat pranams to Sri Vaishnava Das Babaji and returned to his father's kutia, where he related to his father what he had heard. So Vaishnava Das is not saying very much, but he's saying a lot just by his absolute explicit language. He's not flattering. There's no wastage of language here between them. And Devi Das is eligible to actually hear this. So it's had a change in Devi Das's heart. Lahari Marshai was delighted and replied, Devi, you have acquired a great deal of education, but now you can try to attain the highest destination, which is the ultimate benefit for all living beings. All of this is really mind-blowing for Devi Das. Understand what he's actually going through. It's transformational. He came here just to take his father home, but now his very foundation of his spiritual beliefs has been moved principally by Vaishnavadas, just by seeing the living sadhu and hearing his comments about Sankara Bhasya and hearing his comments about Vedanta. This has been enough to shift something within him. Devidas, actually my sole purpose in coming was to take you home. Please return to our house just once, and everyone will become satisfied. Mother is particularly anxious to have darshan of your feet once more. Lahari, I have taken shelter of the lotus feet of the Vaishnavas, and I have pledged that I will never enter any house that is opposed to bhakti. First you will have to become a Vaishnava. First you will have to become Vaishnavas, and then you can take me home. So now Lahari, he's really leveling with his son completely. Because Vaishnava Das has already primed this. Vaishnava Das has already made some space to make it possible for Lahari to be more direct. By Vaishnava Das's purity, something shifted. Devidas, Father, how can you say that? We worship the Lord every day at home. We don't disrespect the chanting of Harinam, and we receive guests and Vaishnavas cordially. Aren't we to be regarded as Vaishnavas? Lahari, your activities are very similar to those of Vaishnavas, but you are not actually Vaishnavas. Devidas, then how can one become a Vaishnava? Lahari, you can become a Vaishnava by giving up your temporary Naimittic duties and adopting your eternal spiritual dharma. Devidas, I have one doubt that I would ask you to resolve decisively. The activities of the Vaishnavas consist of Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, and Atmanivedanam, and they are significantly connected with matter. And they are significantly connected with matter. So why aren't they also referred to as temporary Naimittic? So Devidas has heard the 9 angas of bhakti, and he's considering that they're just connected with matter. He doesn't understand the transcendental nature of this. So he's inquiring about this. I perceive some partiality in this. Activities such as the service of the deity, fasting, and worship with material ingredients are all connected with gross matter. So how can they be eternal? So it's a similar question to Lahari, what he asked. He asked about the Sandhya Vandana. He asked about the Gayatri mantras. Now Devidas, he's asking about the 9 angas of bhakti, and he considers them to be materially connected, and he wants that doubt cleared. Lahari, my son, I also needed a long time to understand this point. Try to understand this very carefully. There are 2 types of human beings: those whose interests are connected with this material world, Aika, Aika, how do you say that? Aika, and those who aspire for superior attainments in the future, Paramatik. Those in the first category only strive for material happiness, reputation, and material prosperity. Those in the second category are of 3 types: those who are devoted to Ishvara, Ishanugata, and Ishanugata, those who are fixed in the pursuit of monistic knowledge aiming at liberation, Gyan Nishta, and those who covet mystic powers, Siddhi Karma. So these are 3 types, and they're not paramatic, these 3 types. They're not eternal. The Siddhi Karmis are attached to the fruits of Karma Kand, and they desire to obtain supernatural powers by their performance of karma. This is why we don't want to get confused. Last time you asked the question about Siddhi Bhakti. So that perfect Bhakti is in a different sense to this. That's why Siddhi Bhakti is not a common phrase. Shuddha Bhakti is a common phrase. Siddhi Bhakti is not a common phrase, even though it's only used once in the whole book. So we should consider that. The Siddhi Karmis are attached to the fruits of Karma Kand, and they desire to obtain supernatural powers by their performance of karma. The methods which they adopt to attain such unearthly powers are yaga, offering oblations, yagna, performing sacrifice, and Astanga Yoga, the eightfold yoga system. They accept the existence of Ishvara, but they believe that he is subordinate to the laws of karma. This category includes the material scientists. So this is a huge paragraph that he's saying here. He's opening it out completely. This is many, many truths are spoken here, because we often consider mystic saints or yogis to be self-realized in their ability to manipulate the material energy with their siddhis. But this puts them more in a position of striving for a God nature rather than service to God. This principle of devotion is such a sacred gem of performing this devotion in our lives, and not trying to acquire anything externally, not even mystic siddhis. So we see so much of the populace, if they're not direct karmis, then they're trying to acquire some sort of mystic siddhi or moksha. We see this across the board. This is in the cases of so many societies and so on that have this as their goal. The Jnani Nishtas try to awaken their identity with Brahm by cultivating impersonal monistic knowledge. Their path is actually to go like Nirvishesh Brahm. They're not devotional. It's Nirvishesh Brahm. They don't know or care whether Ishvara exists or not, but they fabricate an imaginary form of Ishvara anyway for the purpose of practicing sadhana. How horrible. The fruit of monistic knowledge is realizing one's identity with Brahm, and the monists aspire to attain this eventually by constantly engaging in the practices of bhakti directed towards their imaginary form of Ishvara. This is actually like the Devas. The Devas want to achieve that Brahm realization. We've said before how Brihaspati is described as being Brahman realized. So this is the ultimate conception for the Devas, not Brahma or Shivji. They have a conception directly of the Supreme Lord, because Lord Brahma, in his Leela, this Brahma Vimohan Leela with Krishna, he was seeing Krishna directly. And Shivji, there are so many pastimes when he directly is with the Lord. When they obtain the results of Gyan, they have no more use for the Ishvara that they have merely imagined as a means to achieve their end. When their bhakti towards Ishvara bears its desired fruit, it is converted into Gyan. According to this doctrine, neither Bhagavan nor bhakti to Bhagavan is eternal. So this is a tragic state of consciousness for the Jnani. They just merge into that Brahma Gyan, and they lose any sense of that devotion to Ishvara that they had maintained previously, just to acquire that apparent goal of Brahman realization by performing different austerities, etc. The Ish and Anugatas, those who are devoted to Ishvara, are the third category of those who seek higher attainments in the future. Paramatikas. Factually speaking, they are the only ones who strive for Paramata, the highest goal of life. In their opinion, there is only one Ishvara who is without beginning or end, and who manifests the jivas and the material world by his own potencies. The jivas are his eternal servants and remain so even after liberation. That's the point. Even after liberation. This is what someone like Devidas would have a hard time comprehending, that there's something else after we've achieved the goal of liberation. The eternal dharma of the jiva is to remain eternally under the guidance of Ishvara, for he can do nothing by his own strength. So these other two paths are called arohapanta. They're trying to descend to this highest state of attainment by their own efforts. They're not able to imbibe pure devotion. But this final path is avarohapanta. We can remember the difference between these two terminologies. Ava is like avatar, descends. Our path is to connect with the descending potency, the avaroha panta. Panta is path. So this avaroha panta is the path of the bhakta, because he knows intrinsically, intuitively, that he is insignificant. He is anuchit. This is what all these scriptures are proclaiming to us. We are tiny. Krishna is great. Having that submissive humility is the first requirement on this path, to realize that we're in a place of intoxicated pride in the material world. That's where we're coming from. We've performed various activities to acquire the fulfillment of our karmic desires. This is the place of karma, the karma yonis. This is the land, the platform for attaining karma. So we have just been performing that. The jiva cannot obtain any eternal benefit by the performance of karma. However, when he submits himself to Sri Krishna's shelter, he obtains all perfection by his grace. This is what we just said. By this grace, and this path is described as avaroha panta. When we become submissive to the descending potency of the Lord, then the Lord can ignite our transcendental nature to wake up our relationship, our eternal relationship with the Lord. And then we become one like the Lord in the sense of our ability of transcendental qualities to serve him satisfactorily. That wakes up our transcendental nature to serve him in a transcendental way. Otherwise, how can you love Krishna? How can you render service on the higher platforms of Raganuga Bhakti, unless you've come to your transcendental Swarup, your Staibhag, your Siddha Swarup, and that's completely transcendental. Those who covet mystic powers, siddhi karmas, follow karma kand, and those who cultivate monistic knowledge, gyan nishta, follow gyan kand. So the mystic yogis perform all kinds of austerities to achieve these mystic cities, and the Gyanis, they perform a deepening appreciation of the Gyan Shastras. This is the distinction between their practices. But the Bhakta, he just endeavors to strive to perform pure devotion in his life. The Ishanugatas are the only devotees of Ishvara. The Gyan Kandis and Karma Kandis pride themselves on being interested in higher attainment, Paramartika, but in reality they are not pursuing the highest goal, but seeking temporary material gain, and whatever they say about Dharma is Naimittik. So this is what Bhaktivinoda Thakur has been saying from the beginning. Naimittika-dharma must be relinquished because it won't take us to transcendence. It's all concerned with, like the yogi, he's concerned with being superior to matter in the sense of developing his own mystic cities. And the jnani is wanting to become liberated from matter altogether. But it's both with a personal incentive. It's not about love. It's not about devotion. Neither of these paths are about devotion. So therefore they must be temporary. They must be naimittic, these paths, because they won't reach the connection with transcendence. The present-day worshippers of Shiva, Durga, Ganesh, and Surya are known respectively as Shivas, Shaktas, Ganapatyas, and Suryas, and they all follow Gyan Kand. They adopt the angas of bhakti, such as Shravanam and Kirtan, only to attain mukti, and ultimately the undifferentiated, impersonal Nirvishesh Brahm. So this is in answering to his question. Why is Shravanam, Kirtan, and Vishnu Smaranam considered material? It's considered material when it's practiced by materialists, like the Suryas, like the Shivas, the Ganapatis, etc. They're practicing this to attain some material fruit, either mystic siddhi, which is material also, or because it's just in the subtle realm, or it's to merge into the Brahmajyoti, the Nirvishesh Brahm, which is like death for the soul. They adopt the angas of bhakti, such as Shravanam and Kirtan, only to obtain mukti and ultimately the undifferentiated impersonal Niveshesh Brahm. Those who engage in Shravanam and Kirtan without any desire for bhukti or mukti are engaged in the service of Sri Vishnu. Very clear, categorically clear. Among these five deities, the Srimurti of Bhagavan, Sri Vishnu, is eternal, transcendental, and full of all potencies. Those who do not accept Bhagavan as the object of worship are merely worshipping temporary objects. My son, the service that all of you render at home to the deity of Bhagavan is not paramatic, because you do not accept the eternality of Bhagavan's form. That is why you cannot be counted among the Ishanugatas. Now I hope you have understood the difference between Nitya and Naimittic Upasana, worship. Devidas. Yes, if one worships the Sri Vigraha, deity of Bhagavan, but does not accept that Vigraha as eternal, then it is not worship of an eternal object. However, can't one adopt a temporary means of worship to attain the eternal truth, which is ultimately distinct from any other temporary forms? Lahari. Even if that were the case, such temporary worship cannot be called eternal dharma. The worship of the eternal Vigraha, as performed in Vaishnava Dharma, is Nitya-dharma. In other words, there's no compromising on this. You can't play around with it. You can't. It has to be pure in the mentality. Devidas can't pretend that he's worshipping the deity and seeing Vishnu if actually he's not. It's not a cheating process. Devidas. But Sri Vigraha that is worshipped is fashioned by a human being. So how can it be eternal? This same conversation will be taken forward by the Muslims at the end of this chapter also. It's the same topic of the eternality of Sri Vigraha, which is interesting that Bhaktivinoda Thakur has put them both in the same chapter. Lahari, the Vigraha worshipped by the Vaishnavas is not like that. Bhagavan is not formless like Brahm. On the contrary, he is the all-powerful, concentrated embodiment of eternity, knowledge and bliss. It is that Satchit Ananda Gana Vigraha that is the worshipable deity of the Vaishnavas. Bhagavan's transcendental form of eternity, bliss and knowledge is first revealed in the pure consciousness of the jiva, and then it is reflected in the mind. The external form of the deity is fashioned according to this transcendental form revealed in the mind and by the power of Bhakti Yoga. The Satchit Ananda form of Bhagavan then manifests in the deity. When the devotee takes darshan of the deity, that deity unites with the transcendental form of Bhagavan that the devotee sees in his heart. The deity that the Gyanis worship, however, is not like that. They think that the deity is a statue made of material elements, but that state, but that state of Brahm, is present in it while they are conducting their worship, and that it becomes a mere material statue again after they have finished their worship. It's just like here, all the different pujas that go on in Bengal regularly, they throw the deities into the Ganga. There's loads and loads of deities all by the guts, piles of them just sitting there rotting. They worship them, and when they finish their worship, they just toss them away. They're not invested with any enduring mood to worship that deity. So we see that here. Present in it while they are conducting their worship, and that it becomes a mere material statue again after they have finished their worship. Now you should consider the difference between these two conceptions of the deity and their respective methods of worship. When you obtain Vaishnava Diksha by the mercy of a genuine guru, you will be able to correctly understand this difference by observing the results of both. So we'll stop there. But this is powerful dialogue between Devidas and his father. And then very soon the Muslims are going to come on the scene and they're going to ask the same question basically. So we'll conclude this chapter on Monday. So Jaiva Dharma ki jai, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki jai, Gold Premanande, Hari Hari Bol. So now we've come to page 90 of chapter 5, and Devi Das has met Vaishnava Das. He's had a very inspiring conversation with him. He's been inspired to actually study the Vedanta Sutra, which was a big upgrade from where he was previously. We can tell Bhaktivinoda Thakur has put this, but Devi Das is not out of the woods by a long way yet, as we're going to discover. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur is portraying these characters so we can empathize with them, and we can see where we can also deviate if we have some misconceptions here. So then Devi Das has spoken nicely with his father, and he's saying that I'll just read this paragraph prior. Devi Das, this is the top of page 90. Yes, now this all makes sense to me. Now I see that the Vaishnavas are not fanatics driven by blind faith. Neither they are endowed with subtle or discriminating insight. There is a major difference between the worship of Srimurti and the temporary worship of an imaginary form of the Lord that has been imposed on a material object. So this is a huge transformation that he's had. There is no difference in the external procedures of worship, but there is a vast difference in the faith of the two worshippers. It looks the same. Devi Das thought he was doing the same. He thought he was performing Vaishnava Seva. But now he's understanding that his mood was completely different. His mood was coming from a karmic place to fulfill the material desires in his heart. It wasn't focusing on devotion to the Lord, which we just discussed before about Devananda Pandit, and the Bhagavatam is only focusing on devotion. So it's the same principle. I will think about it for some days. Father, today my greatest doubt has been dispelled. Now I can say emphatically that the Jnani's worship is merely an attempt to cheat Sri Bhagavan. I will submit this topic at your feet again at a later time. So this is tremendous victory, that Devi Das has been influenced by this purity, principally of Vaishnava Das. After saying this, Devi Das, Vidyaratna, and Shambhu departed for their residential quarters. They returned to Lahari Maharshai's kutia in the late afternoon, but there was no opportunity to discuss these topics further, for at that time everyone was immersed in Harinam Sankirtan. The following afternoon, everyone seated themselves in Paramahamsa Babaji's bower. Devi Vidyaratna and Shambhu sat next to Lahari Maharshai. Just then, the Kazi from the village of Brahma Pushkarini arrived. When the Vaishnavas saw him, they all stood up and offered him respect, and the Kazi also greeted the Vaishnavas with great pleasure and then sat in the assembly. Paramahamsa Babaji said, "You are blessed, for you are a descendant of Chand Kazi." By the way, Brahma Pushkarini, this is, if you know the Mayapur, if you know the ISKCON temple, from there you come to the Chaitanya Mat at the end of the different mats. And then after there, you go to the Chandkazi's tomb. And just beside there, just a little bit beyond there, is this Bilva Pushkarini. It's actually the place where Nilambara Chakravarti, who's the grandfather of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, has his residence there. And there's a nice Jagannath temple there also. So that's the location we're talking about. That's where he's come from. And he's come to Godrum to honor the Vaishnavas. Paramahamsa Babaji said, "You are blessed, for you are a descendant of Chandkazi, who was an object of the mercy of Sri Mahaprabhu. Please kindly bestow your mercy upon us." Always resonating with deep humility. This person is a Muslim. And Devi Das is very much aware of this, as we'll discover, because he's about to ignite the whole debate in the next chapter, chapter 6, because of this. The Qazi said, By the mercy of Sri Mahaprabhu, we have become the objects of mercy of the Vaishnavas. Gauranga is the Lord of our life. We do not do anything without first offering our Dandavat pranams to him. So this is the infallible mercy of the Supreme Lord upon the Chankasi at that pivotal time in history when he influenced the heart of that Chankasi. We know the pastime, tremendous pastime. The whole of Navadvip went out with lighted torches, loud, resonating kirtan, thunderous kirtan, intimidated the Kasi. And this was like the first absolute revolution mood. Indians don't usually revolt in this way. They're not revolutionary spirited. But this time, led by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they did. And they completely um, cowed down the Kazi, who was terrified. And he revealed on his chest the previous night of his dream the marks of Nrsingadev had told him. This is when he broke the drum. So all of these pastimes are there, we're remembering when we think of the Chankasi. Lahari Mashai was a learned scholar in the Farsi language, and he had studied the 30 Safaras of the Quran and many books of the Sufis. He asked the Qazi, according to your ideology, what is meant by mukti? So it's a good starting point for discussion. The Qazi replied, what you refer to as the jiva, individual soul, we call ruh. This ruh is found in two conditions, ruh mujarrad, the consciousness or liberated soul, and ruh tarkibi, the conditioned soul. So two types. There's the liberated soul, as we also speak, and there's the conditioned soul. What you refer to as spirit, chit, we call mujarrad, and what you refer to as matter, achit, we call jism. Mujarrad is beyond the limitations of time and space, whereas jism is subordinate to time and space. The ruh, tarakibi, and the badajiva, or the badajiva, has a material mind and is full of ignorance, malfut, and desires. The ruh mujarrad are pure and aloof from all these contaminations, and they reside in the spiritual abode, which is known as alam al-mashal. The ruh becomes pure through the gradual development of ishq or prem. There is no influence of jism or matter in that abode where Koda, God, brought the prophet Paigambar Sahib. Yet even there the ruh remains as a servitor, banda, and the Lord is the master. So he's saying exactly the same philosophy, but with different vocabulary in Islam. Therefore, the relationship between Banda and Koda is eternal, and Mukti is actually the attainment of this relationship in its pure form. So that's what he considers. But it's vague, it's not clear, it doesn't hit it on the head. The Quran and the literature of the Sufis explain these conclusions, but not everyone can understand them. Gauranga Mahaprabhu mercifully taught Chankasi all these points, and since that time we have become his unalloyed bhaktas. But his description of mukti, he's talking about that attainment when the relationship is pure, but there's nothing more than that. There's nothing about the nature of that relationship, etc., which is what Mahaprabhu actually came to give, this raganuga. So he brought that Chankasi a certain distance. Lahari, what is the primary teaching of the Quran? Qazi, according to the Quran, the Lord's personal abode, which is the highest attainment in the spiritual world, is known as Bahisht. It is a fact that there is no formal worship there, yet life itself is worship, ibad. The residents of that abode are immersed in transcendental bliss simply by seeing the Lord. This is the very same teaching that has been presented by Sri Gaurangadev. So this is Vaikuntha.
Vaikuntha or Shantaras?
Well, in Vaikuntha there's only Shantaras and a little bit of Dasyaras. So it's very mixed. That's what I said. It's not like hitting the nail on the head, so to speak. What does he understand? Lahari, does the Quran accept that the Lord has a transcendental form? Now, this is the principle. This is going to be discussed again in depth in the 11th chapter. The 11th chapter, there's a beautiful discussion between the Kasi again and all the Vaishnavas, specifically about the Murti, which they cannot accept. And that's a beautiful explanation. Kazi, the Quran states that the Lord has no form, but Sri Gaurangadev told Chand Kazi that this teaching of the Quran means that the Lord cannot have a material form. This is always the trip up, the mistake that people conclude. He has got no form there, but we're talking about a transcendental form. He has no material form. It does not preclude the existence of his pure spiritual form. Paigambar Sahib saw the divine loving form of the Lord in accordance with his level of eligibility. Very important. According to our adhikar, this much we can appreciate of the Lord today. We should consider my own advancement is according to my adhikar. I can't aspire for that realization or that, that realization that perhaps a more senior Vaishnava will have. I can aspire for it, but I can't pretend that I have it. I have to always be diligent about accepting my own level, my adhikar. The transcendental moods and sentiments that are characteristic of the other rasas remain hidden from him. Just a second. So the Kazi is saying this, that the transcendental moods and sentiments that are characteristic of the other rasas remain hidden from him. So the Kazi didn't know anything more beyond Shanta ras, basically.
Not the Kazi, this Paigambar. Paigambar
Oh,
Sahib
Paigamba.
saw the
Sorry.
divine loving form of the Lord in accordance with his level of eligibility.
Very good, very good. So the transcendental moods of Paigamba were not disclosed to him. Yes, very good. Thank you for that clarification. Lahari, what is the opinion of the Sufis in this regard? Kazi, they adhere to the doctrine of Ana al-Haq, which means I am Koda. That means Mayavad. The Sufi, Aswab, how you say that? Aswab, doctrine of Islam is exactly the same as the Advaitavad doctrine, Mayavad. Because often we think of the Sufis spinning around, doing like that, and we have the impression perhaps they're very esoteric, mystical personalities. Perhaps they are, but they're Mayavads because they don't acknowledge the Supreme Lord and his form or their relationship with him. Lahari, are you a Sufi? Kazi, no, we are not. We are unadulterated devotees. Gauranga is our very life. The discussion went on for a long time, and finally Kazi Sahib offered his respects to the Vaishnavas and departed. Harinam Sankirtan followed, after which the assembly dispersed. So this is the end of our 4th chapter. So I want to go straight into the 6th chapter now, because we missed a couple of days, and I want to move ahead with the pastime here. So chapter 6, Nitya-dharma, race and caste. This is a very dense chapter, and it's going to be describing these topics of caste and race in great. It's in conjunction with this conversation that has just taken place. It'll be described. Devidas is not happy with the respect that the Vaishnavas offered to the Qazi. He couldn't understand how they accept him into their assembly because they're Muslims, and he couldn't bridge that um, transcendental vision that the Vaishnavas have of the Jiva within every soul. And if that Jivatma, even if he's in the body of a Muslim, but if he's favorable to transcendental topics and to subject matters of devotional service, then he's to be given credence as a Vaishnava. This is going to be described in this next chapter. So, chapter 6, Devidas Vidyaratna was a teacher, and for a long time he had been firmly convinced that the Brahmanas were foremost among all Varnas. Yes, that's what we've been hearing. He believed that no one except Brahmanas are fit to obtain the highest goal of life, that unless he takes birth in a Brahmin family, the jiva cannot attain mukti. This is indelibly imprinted from before their birth, if they're seminally coming in families of Brahmanas. They're indoctrinated completely with this. And it's all pervasive still today across India. It's very deep. Krishna himself manifested this Varnashram Dharma, but Daivi Varnashram. It was never supposed to become a caste system or something like that. That wasn't its purpose, intention. He also believed that birth in such a family is the sole cause of developing the characteristic nature of a Brahmana. Yes, completely misconception. When he heard the discussions between the Vaishnavas and the descendants of Chankazi, he became completely dissatisfied. He could not penetrate the statements of Qazi Sahib at all, for they were full of deep fundamental truths. Qazi Sahib had been influenced by Gauranga Mahaprabhu, and he was sharing exactly the same philosophy, ultimately the distinction between the Jiva and Krishna, in a very transcendental explanation, but they just had different words for it. But Devidas, with this, we can say, weight on his consciousness of his abhiman, his identity as a Brahman, a caste Brahmana. And I can't understand this because I'm not born in India, not from here, but I can appreciate that it's a very thick abhiman, identity, that this is what we are. In the Western world, we have people who come from higher families and so on. But yes, many of them hold that they are like royalty, for example. They expect to have service performed to them if they're born in those families, regardless of their character. So those in higher, um, uh, we can say, castes in the Western world, they have that there as far as royalty is concerned. But the populace don't have the same honor for them entirely as the dharmic nature of the Indian populace have for the Brahmanas, because Krishna himself worshipped the Brahmanas. The Brahmanas traditionally for hundreds and thousands and millions of years have been worshipped foremost. These great sage Brahmanas, Jamanagni, Vashishta Rishi, these were all Brahmanas. Perturbed at heart, Devidas Vidyaratna began to think, indeed, the Muslim race is a strange phenomena, and one cannot make any sense of what they say. Of course, Father has studied Farsi and Arabic, and he's been studying religion for a long time, but why does he give so much respect to the Muslims? A Hindu is obliged to take a birth in order to purify himself if he even as much as touches a Muslim. So what could Paramahamsa Babaji Maharaj have been thinking when he invited such a person to be seated in the assembly and offered him so much respect? Completely blew his mind. So from this we can appreciate this massive ingrained distinction that the general people have. How are we going to purify that misconception to give them Rag Mag? Mahaprabhu himself was giving this Harinam mantra to the Harijans. He wasn't making any distinction at all. But today, casteism is very strong still. That very night, Devidas said, Shambhu, I cannot remain silent in this matter. I shall ignite a blazing fire of logical debate and burn this heretical view to ashes. It is here in Navadvip that stalwart scholars like Sarvabhauma and Siramani discussed the Nyaya Shastra, and Raghunandan churned the 28 truths from the Smriti Shastra. How is it that the Hindus and the Muslims are now intermingling in this very same Navadvip? Perhaps the teachers of Navadvip have not gotten wind of this news yet. Vidyaratna applied himself wholeheartedly to his task for a couple of days. At daybreak, a light drizzle had fallen. By mid-morning, oppressed by the clouds, the sun had not been able to cast a single glance upon the earth. Devi and Shambhu finished a meal of khichdi before 10 o'clock and got ready, sensing that the appropriate moment was upon them. In Sri Godarum, the Vaishnavas had been delayed in their madhukari. However, almost all of them had honored prasad and were sitting in a large kutia to one side of the Madhavi Malati bower. Very beautiful language and description that Bhaktivinoda Thakur is giving us here. More paintings should be produced from the descriptions of these Jaiva Dharma assemblies, etc. Paramahamsa Babaji, Vaishnava Das, Pandit Anantadas from the village of Nrsimhapalli, Lahari Mahashai, and Yadava Das from Kulia started chanting Harinam on their Tulsi Mala, absorbed in Paramananda. At that time, the famous Pandit Krishna Chudamani arrived together with Vidyaratna Mahashai, Chatubhuj Padaratna from Samudgar, Chintamani Nayaratna from Kasi, and Kalidas Vachaspati from Purvastali. The Vaishnavas offered great respect to the learned Brahmanas and had them seated. Paramahamsa Babaji said, It is said that an overcast day is inauspicious, but this day has become most auspicious for us. Today the Brahman Pandits of the Dham have purified our kutia with the dust of their feet. Vaishnavas naturally consider themselves more insignificant than grass, so they all offered pranams, saying, Vipra Charanbhyai Namaha, obeisances unto the feet of the Brahmanas. The Brahmana Pandits, who considered themselves to be respectable scholars, responded by offering blessings to the Vaishnavas and then sat down. So we see the dramatic difference between the humility of the Vaishnavas and the pride of the caste Brahmanas who consider themselves so aloof that they will offer their ashishvad, their blessings, to the Vaishnavas. The Brahmanas whom Vidyaratna had prepared for a debate offered pranam to Lahari Mahashai because he was senior to all of them, because he's a Brahmana. Lahari Mahashai, who was now conversant with the confidential truths of the Shastras, immediately returned pranam to the Pandits. Of all the Pandits, Krishna Chudamani was the most eloquent. He had debated the meaning of the Shastra with many other Pandits in Kashi, Mithila, and numerous other places, and had defeated all of his opponents. He was short, with a lustrous, dark complexion and a grave countenance, and his eyes shone like a pair of stars. Now he began the discussion with the Vaishnavas. Chudamani said, Today we have come to take darshan of the Vaishnavas. Although we do not support all your conduct, we very much admire your exclusive devotion. Sri Bhagavan himself states in Bhagavad Gita, Apichet Sudaracharo Bhajate Mam Ananya Bhak Sadubhya Eva Sa Mantavya Samyak Vyavesito Hisa. Even if one is an abominable sinner, if he worships me with exclusive devotion, he is to be considered a sadhu, for his intelligence is firmly situated in the proper determination. So it's very kind of sarcastic opening of Chudamani. He's, anyway, we should understand his mood is not very respectful, particularly. This statement of the Bhagavad Gita is our evidence, and it is because of this conclusion we have come to take darshan of the sadhus today. But we have one complaint. Why do you associate with Muslims on the pretext of bhakti? We wish to discuss this matter with you. Whoever amongst you is most expert to debate should step forward. The Vaishnavas were distressed by Krishna Chudamani's words, and Paramahamsa Babaji said very humbly, "We are fools. What do we know of debate? We simply act in accordance with the behavior shown by the previous Mahajans. You are all scholars, so you may recite the instructions of the Shastras, and we will listen in silence." So this is just about to begin this conversation. We'll just read a little bit more. Chudamani said, "How can you act according to such a statement? You are under the auspices of Hindu society, and if you perpetrate practices and teachings that are opposed to the Shastra, the world will come to ruin. We will practice and preach against Shastra, and at the same time claim that we are on the path of the Mahajans? What kind of talk is this? Who is the Mahajan? One can be truly known as a Mahajan only if his behavior and teachings are in accordance with Shastra. How can there be any benefit for the world if we simply label anyone like a Mahajan and then quote the saying, Mahajanyo yena kata sapanta? One should follow the path of the Mahajans. Chudamani's words became intolerable for the Vaishnavas, so they left and consulted with one another in a separate kutia. They concluded that since the Mahajans were being accused of being at fault, it was imperative that they refute the charges as long as it was in their power to do so. Paramahamsa Babaji chose not to participate in the debate. Pandit Anantadas Babaji was a scholar of the Nyaya Shastra, but everyone requested Sri Vaishnavadas Babaji to conduct the debate. The Vaishnavas could immediately understand that Devidas Vidyaratna had organized this turmoil. Lahari Maharshai was also present, and he added, Devi is extremely proud. His mind became disturbed on the day he witnessed our behavior with Qazi Sahib, and that is why he has now brought all these Brahmin Pandits here. So we'll leave it there today, and tomorrow go into this dynamic discussion. Not really a discussion. Vaishnava Das is going to straighten these smarter Brahmins out amazingly with his Shastric eloquence. He's going to defeat them absolutely brilliantly on every single angle. It's an incredible chapter, this chapter 6. It's very thick, very intense, and the arguments that he presents are beautiful. Okay, so Jaiva Dharma ki jai. Anantakota Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Gold Premanandi Hari Hari Bol.